we only have one, right?
Right. What's your grade? Is it
It's 5 through 8.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, which is 5 through 8.
That's so fun. That's
It
really
is,
unique.
you know, it is a really fun
That's
band.
my favorite.
It's really, they are so wacky. I'm like, what's your name this year? How do you identify? What's your like, you just, let me tell you, it's all over the place. Like, they come in and they're quite unique little bits. It's that level. It's that time in their life and they're like, I'm gonna try out all the things. I'm not a little kid anymore. And you still kid. It's fun. It's fun. It's wild.
People never believe me when I say that 7th graders are my favorite.
Oh, I love the 10 to 14 year old range. I love it.
Okay.
And I really, it's been really fun. Will you come to our because I live my sister. It's fun. They're fun little kids. What is your grade range?
You go K-12.
Okay.
And we've got right here in my campuses.
Oh,
One
so are you just directed then over all of them?
Yes.
Okay, so your
So
job
I've been with Sunday Company almost 20 years now.
Okay.
And I started as a teacher in 7th grade, and then this is my first official year as a instructor.
Okay.
See if you can see me.
Yeah, I'm glad that they took the
following
your.
That was fantastic.
Okay, guys, we're going to try to get started. There's a lot of people on Zoom, and I'm trying to manage where to stand so that the owl gets me in the right spot. Will you advance to the next slide on this other computer?
Sorry.
Okay. So, thank you for coming. I'm so excited to have so many people here, and we're going to try really hard to get more than 3 of you in person next time, but we do have about 30 people online, so that's awesome. My name's Amy Pace. I am the Strategic Growth and Innovation Specialist and the School Safety Liaison for the State Charter School Board. Lisa, can they hear us okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So happy to be here today. We're going to go over a couple of things. The first is just our welcomes from the SESB, and then we have some really awesome speakers that are going to present today. So we'll go through those as we go. Will you go to the next slide? As far as updates go from the SESB, the first thing is we are so excited about having a full board. So we have some new board members. Will you go to the next slide? I'm sure you guys have heard, but if not, we have Adam Gerlach, Mikkel Boss, and Brandon Johnson. Mikkel and Brandon were sworn in at our board meeting last week. Adam was out of town for a family issue, but we'll get him sworn in soon, and we are just excited to have them joining us and have a full board again, which also means that the work that some of the committees do can continue. One of the things being updating charter agreements. So if you've been thinking about updating your charter agreement, or if you've started the process and then haven't heard anything, it's because we haven't had an authorizing committee for a month or two. But now we have the full board again, and we'll start moving those through. So we're really encouraging schools to update their charter agreements. The template's pretty easy to go through, and it's just going to provide a lot cleaner copy of your agreement. And we'll have 2 signing days a year to take care of those. So get the process started if you're thinking about it, and you can reach out to the staff if you have any questions. Yeah. Oh, now it's you. Now we're going to turn some time over to Lisa.
So hi, I am Lisa Cooper-Luke, and I work mostly in finance. But one thing that I am working on, we have contracted with someone to do some policy training to help you guys get all of your policies in order, help you, just help you understand what you need to do for the policies. The first training is going to be on September 24th at 10 a.m. It's going to be virtual. And during that meeting, they're going to go over basically just general high overview regarding policies. And from there, they're going to, with your input, they will determine which policies they're going to be training on. There will be a total of 11 meetings. We will send this out, so don't worry about taking everything down. But some of them we are going to work or have them done during the directors' meetings, just to kind of make good use of your guys' time is what our hope is. There are a couple of months, February and March, where there will be 2 trainings taking place. We also are going to have a policy list for your required policies, so you know exactly what you need to have in which policies you need to have, and I believe we're going to get some model policies for you, or at least samples as well, that you'll have. So that is basically the information on those policy trainings. The next one, this is, like I said, I usually work in the finance arena, and this is our business administrators training and their dates. The reason I'm bringing it up with you is there's a lot of good information that we give at those trainings, and so if you have a BA who's basically just keeping the books and not really involved much more than that, we do train on high-level things like risk management and, you know, budgeting, getting a good budgeting workflow going, and those kind of things. So just, you know, maybe ask them what they're learning and see what you can maybe implement from what they're learning that you haven't before. Yes?
For the policy trainings, if you have a board person who helps with writing policies, could you invite them to attend those as well, or is it really just for the directors?
No, we actually, and I'm glad you asked that, actually, because we did send out a survey to all board members and to directors, hopefully you got those, about what, you know, would be a good time frame for training. We would ask that you share this information with your board members. We have a, in UCAP, UCAP is where we get our information that we use to send out our things to the board members and to the director. Well, the directors, I think there's a different one, but to our BAs as well. And I know this is something with the newer schools I've noticed, especially, is that that information on your BAs and your board members are not getting uploaded into UCAP as a user, or you put them in as a user, you put their name and, you know, an email, and that's where we pull from to send stuff out. And some of those are so out of date. When we did this survey, we got so many board members that it got bounced back to us that I'm not going to send it out to the board members until I know people are updating that. So if you could pass the information, we would love to have the board members attend as well if they can. We do plan on recording everything, so it will be available if they're not available to take it as well. Same is true with our meetings for our BAs. We pull the information from UCAP and we record, and that can be viewed later as well. But yeah, so I hope you can take advantage of that, and like I said, ask your BAs what they're learning in those trainings, and maybe it's something you can incorporate into your work style at a higher level. Okay, thanks guys.
All right, so the next thing that we're going to cover are some reminders from the School Safety Center. Hopefully you guys are aware of these at least a high level. You may have school safety directors that work in your schools, but a couple of reminders. The personnel designation form is due by September 15th, so we want to make sure that you guys are getting those completed. And then the other one is that if you're going to apply for the security specialist stipend grant, you need to complete the form, and then you're going to upload that into Qualtrics, and that's due on September 15th as well. And also, if you're applying for an alternative application, those are due by the 31st, so you only have a few more days for that one. And we have some of our school safety people that are going to present to us today, so I'm excited to see them. The next announcement is this from Practice to Impact. This is our Innovative Practices professional learning series that we've been a part of. The last event of that is going to be this From Practice to Impact Day. That'll be held here at our offices. There's some flyers about this. I know that I've sent this out a couple of times, but I'm encouraging schools to register school leaders, curriculum directors, even teachers, anybody that you want to send. We still have room. Lunch will be provided, and it's free. So you can pick up a flyer, this flyer, but I know I've sent this out by email as well. The next one is another announcement. You should have received information, I believe it was yesterday when this came out, about an early literacy funding options meeting that Director Fillmore and Director Hutchings are organizing. This meeting is on Thursday the 27th at 3 o'clock on Teams. If you didn't get that invitation and you would like to attend, please reach out to any of the staff and we can get that forwarded to you. This is again a problem like Lisa was mentioning, that if we have the wrong information in our system, then the emails go to the wrong people. So make sure that you've updated your information in UCAP, but on that one specifically, if you are interested in attending and didn't get the invitation, please let us know. Okay, one more that I don't have a slide for, but you should have received information about these as well. We have this Leading Together fall convening that it's a contract that we have with the, couldn't stand too close to that, the Utah Educational Policy Center. They're doing a leadership training program. This one is also going to be free to schools to participate, other than you'll need to cover your leader's substitute if they teach a class or something on the days of the training. You should have received information about this by email. This is the fall convening. There's 2 locations. We'll have one in Salt Lake and one in the St. George area. And then leaders that are interested in participating in the full cohort can apply for the Compass program, and there was an application for that. The fall convening is the kickoff for that program, and then they'll have a series of trainings virtually and in person. This is all about leadership development, building capacity, that kind of stuff for your leaders. So there's flyers about this. If you guys have not received this information, let me know. I'm the one that's the liaison on that project, and we can pass that along. Okay, so for people who are in the building, we have a few minutes while we switch presentations. The restrooms are across the hall and just down a little bit if you haven't been in our building before. And there's a water filling station there as well. I also have water in the back that you're welcome to use. And we're gonna just take just a couple minutes to pull up our next presentation, and then we'll get going again. Okay,
All right. All set?
I should be all set.
Okay, perfect. Well, I want to start by saying thank you to Amy for letting us come and join your meeting at the start of this school year. My name is Christina Guevara, and I am one of the paraprofessional behavior training specialists, the shortest title ever at USBE. So myself and my co-specialist, Steffi Monk, both have come together to develop a training for paraprofessionals that we'd love to share with all of our LEAs, but most specifically our charter schools. Next slide, please. What this is we were asked, as USB received a grant through Intermountain Healthcare, to design a 40-hour paraprofessional training that really goes deep into behavior. We have some grounding frameworks that we designed the training around. We really want to make sure that we open up the idea of paraprofessional training and support beyond at least what had been my experience when I was at an LEA of special education or behavior as kind of this subset outside of the general education classroom. We are involving and inviting paraprofessionals from all assignments, all grades, all classroom profiles. What this is going to do is going to allow for staff that's working directly with students in the classroom to have the skills and the knowledge with some hands-on in-person training to go ahead and be that really strong support, not only for the teacher that they work with or the service provider that they work with, but also for the students, and having the skills to be flexible and responsive to those needs. We want to make sure that we're creating opportunities for the paraprofessional to step in and really help enhance classroom safety, but also to help students develop more independence, especially as we see so many students of all needs and individual characteristic makeups coming together into that general classroom setting. Next slide, please. We have 3 guiding frameworks that we've designed this 40-hour training around. The first is the updated Utah Standards for Instructional Paraeducators. Within those standards, which I've come to find as I've had conversations with other LEAs, is that not a whole lot of people knew that the standards existed or that they weren't special education specific. With the revision that was approved by our board back in March, we've gone ahead and added a 5th standard. We've taken all of those basic components that really kind of set a solid foundation for a paraprofessional, paraeducator in the classroom, and those can actually serve as a solid foundation as someone's moving on to, hopefully within their career, potentially taking on a different role within the school system. So we talk about classroom management, supporting teacher plans, making sure that we have the instructional techniques to provide that guidance for students in all different classroom instructional makeups, whether that's whole group, small group, or working with students one-on-one. We really emphasize data collection as a practice that needs to really be embedded in fidelity and monitoring. But then we take it much deeper as we move into our next framework, which is the Least Restrictive Behavioral Initiatives manual. So that also has gone through some revisions lately. And we really target hands-on strategies that are going to be applicable for and appropriate for a paraprofessional to go ahead and implement. So we really just want to add tools to the toolbox and provide some guidance and guardrails with those legal requirements and parameters that surround supporting students, especially as we start to make our way into those higher level of behavior supports. Our last framework that we designed this around was the CEC Paraeducator Competencies, and these are specific special education competencies. If you haven't yet had a chance to look at those updated standards, you'll see that rather than having additional supporting competencies, we have a set of general for all paraeducators, paraprofessional standards, and then we have some additional competencies that are either knowledge or skill specific to guide someone who has a special education assignment. Next slide. So as I mentioned, this is a blended model. We will be doing most of the work. Will be independent for the paraprofessionals to participate. We're looking at about 32 hours of online independent work. The course is being designed so that it runs independently. There's not need for facilitators, so we can go through the course at their own pace. And then we have that one required 8-hour in-person training where we're really going to target some of those skills that we know need some of that refinement and guidance. So think of de-escalation, different forms of data collection, but also really kind of digging into what is an FBA versus what is a behavior intervention plan, and how does a paraprofessional fit into that equation. Once we have completion of each module, so 5 total, we're looking to pay our paraprofessional participants a stipend. And this is where we've really seen the difference between what we're offering here in Utah versus what's offered anywhere else within the state or even in other states. Really fantastic trainings available, but more often than not, you have to pay to have someone participate. We're actually going to be paying the paraprofessionals a stipend to complete the work outside of their contract hours. So I know we had a little bit of discussion in the room earlier about how many hours a paraprofessional works. This would be on top and it would be direct pay to them. It does not flow through the LEA. And we're really looking at providing a certificate of completion that really outlines what are those competencies that they've demonstrated. Next slide. So I just wanted to give a super quick overview of the 5 modules and what we'll be covering. So we definitely start with the foundations and we go really deep into ethics. Because this is a very behavior heavy training, we do touch on those requirements to become a registered behavior technician, but we make it absolutely very clear that this is not a course that will get you your certification as an RBT. But if you choose to go on and pursue that type of certification, you have a pretty solid foundation and you may actually move through some of that content with more ease because you have this as your background. So we're really looking at those legal frameworks, where does all the discipline guidance come from, and then most specifically, what is that paraprofessional's role? Next slide. Module 2, we really start to talk about behavior and the environment. We talk about the foundational components of behavior, talking about the antecedent behavior consequence. We really get into what are prompts, what is chaining, how do we support skill development, but we also focus on how does this really apply within a classroom setting. At least in my own personal experience, as a professional, behavior was very separate and more of a clinical practice when I first started 20 plus years ago, but now we're seeing that these same methods, these same principles can be applied in a classroom setting and can help students to really kind of achieve success. Next, module 3, we're really focusing in on data collection. So we talk about kind of the more basic forms of data collection, so that tracking that antecedent behavior consequence. But then we go into those higher levels, like we talk about inter-observer agreement. We talk about what is really good quality data versus someone who, you know, oh my gosh, I forgot to track what I just did in that session with a student, and then 2 days later they write it down. So we really get into why is that so important, especially when it comes to documenting true progress for a student when they have certain plans in place. Next. We get into the multi-tiered systems of support and how those play into what is really accessible for a paraprofessional with those Tier 1 classroom supports. We talk about what does that role look like when a student's needs shift to a Tier 2, and we even talk about what does Tier 3 look like when we're looking at very specific, highly structured strategies such as functional communication training and social skills instruction. And then last, we move into module 5, which really takes us to those crisis situations. We dive very deep into the crisis cycle, actually a few times during this course, continue to build up the understanding and go deeper with what that looks like. We rely very heavily on what is that legal requirement as far as documentation, timelines, guidance, what is allowable versus what is not allowable when it comes to specifically emergency safety interventions. And then we wrap up with what does reporting look like, and then staff recovery, because we all know that that's a part of those larger situations, unfortunately. Next slide. So as far as enrollment and compensation, so self-paced learning, we want our participants to work outside of their hours, so this is pay on top of what they're already receiving. There will be a stipend for completing all 5 modules and the 1 8-hour in-person session for earning up a total of $800. Stipends will be paid directly to the individuals. As far as number of participants, and this has been such a wonderful question that we've been getting, and so we've really been designing the program as it gets to go beyond this initial funding that we have available. As of right now, what we're looking at is within each LEA, you get 1 enrollment spot for every school within your LEA. When we send out the enrollment information, we'll be sending a spreadsheet out as far as what are our counts at USBE. If there's any discrepancy, we can certainly have a conversation. Let's say a charter school has 7 schools and you decide that you want to send 3 paraprofessionals from 1 school and the other 4 come from a combination. That's up to you, however you would like to do that. If you decide all 7 come from 1 school, that's completely up to you. We're also looking at what are the options if an LEA chooses to not use all of their spots, and are those available. Because we're looking at training approximately 1,100 participants over the next year and a half, we have divided the number of spots within LEAs to 2 separate cohorts. So if you're a smaller LEA, then you're going to have all your spots available in our first cohort. We can always shift to cohort 2 if necessary. But for those larger LEAs, we definitely have broken that up. For someone who has 26 schools, we're doing, for example, 13 and 13. And as far as how to enroll, we just recently got our approval to work with TACE as the support to provide the stipends and do all of that enrollment with our participants. And so that information is coming soon. I'm crossing my fingers that we can get this information out to LEAs to start enrolling as soon as next week. But the goal really is by the end of the month, and then the drop dead date would be the very beginning of September. What you'll need to know is that this information is going to go to every LEA lead. So if you have in your mind that you have someone else within your schools that you want to take the lead with this work, you'll have the opportunity to identify that person, but it'll come directly to a superintendent or a charter school director. So you'll need the name of we'll need the name of the primary contact, and then we'll also need the name of the participants that you select and their contact information. You'll be filling that out using a spreadsheet, which you'll share back with us. So you're not submitting a form 27 times if you have 27 schools. That doesn't seem fun. Next slide. So this is our contact information. Just as we're here now, are there any initial questions that I can answer?
Any questions online?
Okay.
Let's see. Still have people joining though.
That's okay. Well, if there are any questions, my information is there, Steffi's information is there. Please reach out at any time, but definitely anticipate the information coming your way around the end of the month, if not sooner. So thank you so much.
I have a question.
Yes.
Does the educator need to be reported in Cactus? Because like we work with the step company, like Luma, so they probably wouldn't qualify, right, to get the funding.
They do need to be an employee of the LEA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think you can put your parents unless they have a cactus activity.
So we don't report them. That's what I was wondering.
My parents never put cactus.
Oh,
Because
I
they
see.
started cactus activity,
Oh.
they're not a licensed person.
But they're being paid.
Yeah, I think you want to put licensed people.
You actually can put paraprofessionals into Cactus, but you can, yeah. When I was at my previous LEA, I was able to have some of my staff who aren't licensed educators receive a Cactus center so they can access training. So that is possible. I don't recall the steps to do that, but I'm sure once you have Dr. Hike, who's I know is presenting later, she might be able to answer that question for you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions right now? Okay, then we are gonna move along. We're a little ahead of schedule, and that's never a bad thing. I will introduce our next presenters. We have Ashley Costello and Scott Iyer from the School Safety Center. We are super excited to have them here. Do you have slides?
I do, yeah.
Okay. Let's see.
And then, Amy, we also have a link for you for the online folks.
Okay.
The resource that we'll be passing out. So let
Is
me
it
know
best
if
to just
that
send it
fits
to you?
in that.
Yeah, it might be best to send it.
Yeah, we can do that.
Your email?
Yes. Send it to my email. I'll put it in the chat, and then same with the slides.
Scott, you want to send the updated one from the website?
I'm sending this first, and then we can tell you what else you need to send. Oh, you got it? Everything good?
Yes, you should be good to go.
Okay, I'll send you that updated link too, and you can throw that in the chat.
Okay.
Did you already hand out material?
Yes.
All right, cool. Awesome. This is what we're going to review today. This is what we're going to talk about. Thanks for your patience as we get things rolling.
And then Amy, do we have sound, like sharing with the Zoom folks?
Yeah, we will have a couple.
Let's. That's a question I don't have an answer for.
I guess we'll find out when we try sharing a video.
Yeah.
We can always pull an audible.
So just remember not to stand too close to the owl, because that's what I do. And
Okay.
then, like, can't see you very well.
But it does follow us.
Yeah, it does follow
Cool.
you. Just don't stand too
Yeah,
close.
I love these owls. They're interesting. But everybody can you guys hear me online? Everybody good? I don't see the
Yes, you're
participants.
getting yes.
Okay, good. And yes, for those that are online, there will be some video that will probably need your volume for. Don't turn it up too loud or anything, but just as examples. So, do you want me
Oh, you're
like
gonna
have a
to
clicker?
Give me the look.
I
I don't have a clicker.
You don't have to do that.
You have a clicker.
Here, give me this. You want to plug it in?
I did. I don't see it.
And we can get rolling. Maybe. No, it'll help if I turn this on. So.
Maybe.
No,
I don't know.
still doesn't want to work. That's okay.
Okay.
I'm happy to click through it for you.
Okay, sounds good. All right, thanks for having us. Honestly, there's more people online than in the room, but I'll speak to the folks in the room more than I do. I like presenting to live audiences, but so we are the School Safety Center. This is us. It doesn't. You can see Amy is our newest addition to that. We love being involved with the charter schools. It's important work. If you haven't met us at the School Safety Center, we are kind of unique. We are housed at the Board of Education, but we're a multidisciplinary, multi-agency team that comes together to really focus on school safety issues. I work for the Department of Health and Human Services Office of Substance Use and Mental Health. I'm the school safety or the school mental health specialist on the safety team. Ashley Costello, who is here, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, yes, my name's Ashley, School Safety Center Specialist, so kind of like a catch-all of all things school safety, and I work with at the Board of Education.
We have our Department of Public Safety liaison too, Jeremy Barnes. We work closely with Safe UT. Even they used to be a member on our team. They're no longer, but we still work closely with them. And of course, we're working with charter schools. I think that's an important part of the work we do because we have to come together to address these issues that are the school safety issues that our schools are facing. That's our leadership on the next slide. And to the next slide. We're going to talk about emergency recovery plans today. It's very simple concept. When you think of emergency operating procedures for your school, there are 3 pillars. It is emergency preparedness, emergency response, and emergency recovery planning. For a long time in our state of Utah, we've only really focused on the 2. We are now shifting that as of September of 2025, and new requirements are in place to have recovery plans. And so there's a lot of questions about what does that even mean? How do we get there? And that's what we're going to try and focus a little bit on today. So in that definition, slide before, it really is about these unforeseen events, right? It's not any specific type of safety issue that we want to focus on. Some of this legislation that has been pushed through and some of the rule has been really hyper-focused on one particular type of violence, and that's school shootings. And that will get everybody's attention. And unfortunately, that's the world we live in. But we didn't want this guide, we didn't want this resource and this work to focus solely on that. And that is an important part of it, but there's more to think about. I've got 3 video clips I'm going to run through real quick. All 3 of them are from this school year. That started literally just weeks ago. And these are things that have happened in our region and area that are impacting schools. Go ahead, Ashley.
afforded this car. Okay, you ready? All right, $118 for car
this is
insurance.
not it.
That's how much I was paying, okay?
Just hit space and it should play within.
Okay.
There we go.
Well, we're continuing to follow that breaking news out of Kearns this afternoon. Secure protocol for 3 schools has now been lifted there in the area. Those schools involved were West Kearns and Gormley Elementary and Kearns Junior High. Right now, there's still a large police presence in the area. As you can see from our live look here, our crews there on the ground. We still also don't know exactly why those schools were placed on the lockdown that they were, but of course we are working to learn more information, and as we do, we will keep you updated both on air and online at abc4.com.
That's it. I don't know why they don't play just right out of it, but you'll have to help me out on the navigating of that. I wanted to play that clip first, just because it's interesting that this is the breaking news. This is the story that's being put out in the media. This is alarming to parents when they hear a large police presence outside of schools and schools on lockdown or shut down for whatever protocol they decide to go on, secure. And they might get it wrong, and there might be a lot of misinformation, but this is a disruption to the school community, and certainly part of our plan, part of our guidelines will be suggesting ways of communication in real time to make sure that you're prepared to share with your parents, caregivers, anybody who's in the community, accurate information. And so that's part of it. Go ahead on the next slide. And this one should start at...
Story that's been developing. Fast-moving floods turned southern Utah's...
Good evening, Deanie, and it has been a day, especially for those residents out in Hurricane. Now, this flood started late this morning after heavy rain sent runoff into the city. And now tonight, those crews and residents are digging up that debris, and officials believe that this could take some time.
In Hurricane, the water came fast, rising 3 to 4 feet in some areas and leaving behind mud, brush, and debris.
That we had some debris coming down our Gould's Wash, which runs through the center of Hurricane, and that it was starting to build up, and some of the bridges were being affected.
Tonight, residents are still dealing with mud in their homes, businesses, and vehicles. Hundreds of people, along with city crews and local contractors, are now working side by side to clear it out.
I've seen it happen, but right here in Hurricane, this is uncommon. Students in my boundary area are affected by the homes flooded, debris. It's pretty massive.
The community is also pitching in. Mountain Mike's Pizza provided free meals to 3 elementary schools and to residents helping with the cleanup.
So it's not just going to be a quick, easy thing. I think we'll be cleaning up for weeks after this.
And tonight, neighbors are being encouraged to keep helping neighbors as crews work to reopen major roads.
If you know that.
Okay, so this is an example of a community disaster that impacted schools to some degree. Certainly the students, as she mentioned, on that area are being impacted, but also school lunch was needed to be provided by a local pizza joint, which is awesome. Communities come together, and that's great. But the disruptions in services that can happen with a school just from a flood, maybe it doesn't even move through the actual school itself. So again, another example of something that may impact. Go ahead and play this last one.
Crash, part of the vehicle went over the edge.
From the crash overnight, 5 17-year-olds, 3 with seatbelts, 2 without, over the edge.
Fire setting the vehicles all the way down to the bottom.
Crews raced to get to the young men.
A copy of their advising us of at least 3 passengers in the vehicle.
But even with medical on the way, crews already knew.
Do you have a patient status? Yeah, I think they'll be on help.
Crews have since towed the car away, and the Grand Junction Police Department is investigating whether or not speed played a factor in the crash. In the meantime, they're offering help with the Victim Service Unit.
Those professionals who deal with mental health and grief counselors, any type of professional like that, they are so vital for people to talk to.
And the school district is planning to have resources for students and staff on hand when school starts back up on Tuesday for much of the district. with the heavy weight of the loss of so many young lives on their shoulders.
This one happened just outside of Utah at Grand Junction, Colorado. I think I could have pulled a few more clips about wildfires and maybe another clip or two on possible tornadoes in Tooele. Who knew, right? My point in sharing these clips is to bring to the forefront this attention that unforeseen events are going to happen and they're going to impact your school/school community. And we, now in the state of Utah, want to be better prepared in order to manage those situations. Largely because we want schools, and schools are so important, to be up and functioning. And the better we can do that, not the quicker we can do that, but the better we can do that will ultimately serve everybody, including our students. So a couple quick models that I need to maybe explain really quick, and I think intuitively you understand these things, but it's important within the space of recovery. The first is this population exposure model, and that's just the idea that the closer you are to the epicenter of a disaster, the more likely you are to be impacted. And that's physically and emotionally close to the epicenter of a disaster. You don't have to physically be there to be impacted. If this is a cousin of yours or a friend of yours, or in that case of those 17-year-old boys, 5 17-year-old boys that died in that car crash, do they have brothers and sisters? Do they have potentially family members that work in your schools? There's going to be an impact. We need to best understand that those that are the closest are most likely to be impacted. However, that expands beyond that epicenter to those in the community, those who even just identify with them as the victims. I can think of Uvalde as an example for me, as I'm a parent, and I watched as the live video footage coverage of Uvalde was playing out, and the parents were located just across the street under a tree. I remember this news coverage as they're sitting there waiting to find out if their student is still in the building, if they're at the hospital, if they're being relocated somewhere else. We didn't know, and I just, as a parent, definitely identified with that group. And again, it was part of that exposure model. I think all of us can understand that concept. The next concept that's important to understand is that disaster comes in phases. When we have a disaster, a lot of times we see a lot of push of support into the community. You saw the hurricane example where they were out and they were helping, and that rush of support can come, followed by this disillusionment phase, where in this disillusionment phase, a lot of negative impacts can happen. There's no longer an attention on our particular disaster because we've gone from one crisis to another. That's our news cycle. That's how we roll. It's unfortunate, but at some point the attention will be gone, the resources will be gone, and during that time we can see a lot of impact based on whatever the disaster is. It can be community-wide, it can be classroom-wide, it can be individual. This model can be understood as a community model, but it can also be understood as an individual response type model. And in these disillusionment phase, we might see things like depression and anxiety. We might see things in homes like domestic violence. We might see more poverty in major cases, suicidality, those types of things, especially when you feel like you're going through this alone, right? But ultimately the goal of this model is to show that we want to move to this space of reconstruction. I will call it a space of meaning, purpose, healing post-disaster. And the better we can help support our school communities in that and our individuals in that, the better. And this is not a time-sensitive model as well. This is something that can take place over the course of even years, multiple years in some cases. The final model that I want to share with you is this recovery management time frame. And this is the idea that we need to, through the lens of recovery, think through the immediate response, the short-term response, and also the long-term response. And our board rule and policy does require that as well within our planning. So what we know about recovery is planning in advance is essential. It's no one person's job. We should be doing this together. It's a shared responsibility. The immediate short and long-term needs need to be thought through. Clear and consistent messaging is always helpful. I will say it's most helpful in the moment, but continues to be helpful as we move forward. And then, man, I wish I could meet with every teacher in every classroom across our entire state, because the way that we model ourselves in these hard situations, these most difficult situations, it is key. And so the adult modeling matters, and how we respond, because our children take their cues from us. And so that's not just in the immediate, but that's as we heal and move forward as well. New requirements. It is required. Emergency recovery planning is required. But even if it wasn't required, I would tell you it's the right thing to do. The new change in language is bolded here in orange, where now we have emergency preparedness, emergency response, and emergency recovery plans all being required. And what is an emergency recovery plan, you say? Well, it's defined in board rule as this. It means policies and procedures developed to return the educational entity back to the ordinary daily routine after an emergency by restoring programming, operations, and the school environment. The purpose of which is to manage the immediate, short, and long-term recovery from an emergency incident. So these are new concepts for a lot of folks. And so instead of just giving board rule and saying, go do this thing, we put together a resource. And the rest of this presentation, really, we're going to dig into the resource and try to offer some technical assistance as well, and let you guys think through the different aspects. There are 4 components or 4 elements of recovery planning that are required. And so on the front of that guide, and for you folks online, the PDF version is available. If you guys are able to click into that, I think
Amy dropped the link in the chat.
Amy dropped the link in the chat. So I'd encourage you to pull that up, and it's going to go over in the first page the definitions of the 4 components. And they are, go ahead and click the next slide. They are academic recovery, which is defined as resuming educational programming and teaching after an emergency. Business services, which means resuming operations that aid to the provision of teaching and learning. And then physical and structural recovery, which means restoring your buildings, equipment, supplies. And then finally, health and well-being and behavioral recovery, which means coordinating adequate support to all members of the whole school community after an incident. I think now I'm the mental health specialist, so I think when I think recovery, when most of us think recovery, I think we think about that behavioral health piece, the mental health piece, the human impact that it has. And I will say that I believe that all 4 of these help to support the individual. Because you as schools, you function as businesses that provide education to our little ones, right? And all of those elements are important. Payroll's important, lunch is important, transportation's important, communication's important. But yes, also the mental health and well-being is important. I'll just say that disaster or emergency is going to come in a lot of different forms, and your plan should think through the different disasters that are likely to happen, and you should execute those plans based on the nature of the situation. So just because something happens doesn't mean all elements of the plan are going to be in place. However, all elements of the plan should be thought through in advance, just in case it's needed. Okay. So, I don't have one.
Here you
You
go.
should probably have one of these in front of me. Any questions so far? And questions from folks online, Amy, if you have the ability to field
I'll
those.
watch. If I see any, I'll let you know.
Or-
Can I chime in?
Yeah, please do, please do.
So how we got to this being approved in board rule, we
learn some lessons from other states throughout the country and what has happened with them when they've experienced traumatic events and emergency situations. And we realized that Utah did not yet require emergency plans. And I agree with Scott that even when they weren't required, it's still the best practices that we should do and be prepared. So we worked together, and Scott and the School Safety Center did a lot of research about what do we want to be required in our state. And supplemental with us passing that admin rule R277400, like he said, we wanted to also give you some piece of tangible, where do I get started, or how do I assess my current plans if you already had some. So because they're required, we do want to help LEAs get there, but a lot of this research came from predominantly 4 different pieces of research. However, most of that, I would say, came from REMS, the Readiness and for Emergency Management for Schools, which, depending what day of the week, sometimes their website is active and sometimes it's not, because it is hosted up at that federal level. So you'll see a lot of this language is very similar to the REMS language and what they suggest. However, we presented our recommendations to our board at the Board of Education, and they got to review it, have their own discussions, make some tweaks to pass what they wanted Utah to follow. So that's how we got the 4 different components, and that's how we came up with those definitions. So just a little background on where this idea and this content came from. But yeah, Scott, take us through the first component.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because this is what the research is telling us. This is where opinion kind of goes to the side. And we want to dig into what we know as best practices. Also, the Prepare One training.
Yeah.
We pulled a lot from Prepare One. And there is a national, I want to say National Association of School Principals.
Yep.
That is specific for recovery. That also is another great resource that we pulled from. So those resources, and for anyone that's interested in digging into a little deeper, we can provide those resources for you.
They're also all listed on the front of the page. Good for us.
There you go.
So yeah, you're referring to the National Association of Secondary School Principals.
Yes.
Correct. Cool.
So one thing that I want to just say from the start is this, yes, is a new requirement, but your policies and procedures in emergency preparedness and emergency response might already have some of these elements. You might already be 60-70% of the way there. So part of this guide is to help you understand what you have, which is checking a box that says yes. As you can see on your screen, if you check that box that says yes, it means you already have that in place. That's great. Now it's time to maybe assign who that person is, and maybe it's not Jim. It's the job title of Jim, just in case Jim leaves. We know who in our buildings is responsible for these things. But then it's also formalizing it in one place where it's not just throughout your policy and procedure. It's about really bringing it home and saying, this is our recovery section, which we will access in the chance that we need to access this post-disaster. Do we have any questions online? Are we good?
The only question we have so far is, are there any templates or sample plans that you've seen that would be good to reference for small schools that are trying to do this themselves?
Yes.
Yeah. And so the one thing I would say is, no, we don't. We see that different districts probably are doing better than others. We're waiting for a model plan to really come out that shows what it is, because we at the Board of Education don't create those model plans. These are the elements of the plans that you should think through, but also adapt to your school size and to your own needs. You do have to have all 4 elements. You do have to have the 3 time frames thought through. These are prompting questions that help you better understand where you are at with every one of those particular pieces. So for example, as we review academics recovery, the first one here, the goal is to attend to the academic disruptions and ensure the continuity, is that what it says? Of learning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. And so the first one is like, do we have steps to cancel school for the immediate future? I think everybody does. If so, check yes, say who that person is, and move to the next question. Conducting an all-staff information meeting. This is a meeting that is just for in-house. This is for keeping staff informed. Do you have a way to do that? Do you currently have meetings, or do you have to set up a separate meeting for that? Who's in charge of that? Who runs that? Who initiates that? That's the person's name that you would put in that box. Adjustments for delivering of educational services such as times, locations, virtual or hybrid. I think most of us have overcome the virtual barrier now. That's one of the benefits post-COVID, right? Is that we have some of those systems in place. How do we execute those? How do we make sure that those learning opportunities are still available? If that's part of our initial emergency that schools shut down physically. And then procedures for initiating an academic pause. Academic pause might be something that folks aren't familiar with. I've seen it in some cases with discipline, but taking it outside of a disciplinary idea, it's just the idea that something happens. Now what do we do with the work as it stands currently in the classroom? My suggestion is whatever policy you put around academic pause is also reflected in the syllabus within each classroom. Now what would that look like? Well, that's up to you. But I would hope it wouldn't be, well, because everything went crazy for a little bit, we just give everyone A's, right? That would be, I would say, bad policy. We don't want to encourage emergencies. We don't want to encourage students or anybody to disrupt our schools, aka call in bomb threats in order to improve their grade, right? What is an academic pause for you and your school? What should that look like? Does homework get delayed? Does it get removed? I don't know, but you need to think through it. Also, the last one, we should be already in the immediate of emergency be thinking about what does our reopening plan look like. Reopening schools is an important part of the healing process, the reconstruction process. Bringing kids back to the school space can be a very good part of getting back to normal routine, but it's not necessarily how fast you can do that, it's how best you can do that. And again, based on the nature of the disaster. Let's move to short term. And please, if there's any questions that come up within
Yeah,
these sections.
let me sneak in here for a second. So when Amy reached out to us and asked, like, hey, can you guys come talk to or speak with our charter directors? And absolutely. And she was like, I would love it to be technical skills learned, lessons learned, what can they take away, as opposed to more like a sit and get type one-way informative presentation per se. Because then you kind of leave overwhelmed. So our goal here today is for you, we're doing this together, right? So right now, we're going to take you through the academics recovery, and we're going to spend some time in the immediate. And if you haven't started already, check yes, check no. Who do you think this is assigned to? Or maybe circle it of like, whoa, I need to come back to this question to figure it out with my leadership team. So we're going to be going through it chunk by chunk. Scott's going to take you through it more directive, the first chunk, and then we're kind of set you out in partners or small groups to do a few more on your own and come back and have a big group. But even if you're online, have this pulled up. It is a PDF. It is a fillable, checkable PDF. So perhaps fill out a copy today and save as it. This is where you are today. And then when you come back to it throughout the school year, you know, what types of pieces of your recovery plan do you need to continue to work on with your leadership teams? Questions on that? So that's where we're going to spend the next 25 minutes.
Yeah, and so we'll do this academic section together. And I do think the academic section is probably the one schools are best prepared with initially anyways. So we'll set ourselves up for success. In the short term, our goal is to create conditions that allow students to effectively resume learning activities. So some of the questions, so again, these are prompting questions.
Scott, remind me, what's the time frame for short term?
Short term is in the days to weeks.
Days to weeks, okay. So we're thinking about recovery in the days to weeks after an event.
Yeah, and if you think back to those 3 examples, the police presence outside of a building probably doesn't require too much of that short-term or even long-term thinking. But then you go to the example of the 5 17-year-olds that died just the day before school. That is going to require some of those other elements. Again, the nature of your plan or the nature of the disaster will have you, I don't want to say execute. What's another better word for execute? But it'll
help you prepare and plan for longer term recovery support.
Yeah, okay, whatever. Okay, prompting question. Protocols for registering students to new schools and sharing student records. We move students all the time. What does that look like if all of a sudden you have to move 30 kids, right? Or 40, or a whole school district? We've talked with the superintendent from Joplin, Missouri, and he talked about his process of the 3 or 4 different schools that he had shut down. He had to go through the process of pulling student records and re-register, or enrolling them in new schools.
Yeah, there was a huge tornado that came through their school district, and I think it took with it, unfortunately, 4 schools and their district office. So all in one crisis event.
Yeah. Protocols for making adjustments to class schedules, course curriculum, and extracurricular activities. We probably have some of those. Who's in charge? Conducting reoccurring information meetings with staff. This is an important piece. Again, the communication piece internally within the school community of what is happening and when it's happening. And then finally, in the long-term space of academics recovery, we're looking for ongoing monitoring and remediation. These are the situations where we might have deaths or loss of a teacher, of a student, and how is that impacting a classroom? How is that impacting individual students? Are we monitoring for academic disruption? And are we offering any remediation? And also the attendance monitoring as well. Are students afraid to come back to school if the emergency or disaster took place in the school itself? It's a good indicator of what adjustments might need to be made. So that's an example of one section. We went through all 3 different time frames on that. And for the next slide,
140.
we are going to do a turn and talk activity. Obviously, you folks online will not be turning and talking unless you want to bring in
You can turn
whoever
to a beer.
But we're not going to do the health and well-being. We'll jump over to the physical and structural recovery. And I will say, let's take 5 minutes. We'll have folks go through it. And then what I would like is to have a conversation on the other end of what you noticed, if there's any gaps that you're seeing, clarification within the questions itself. But let's take 5 minutes and work in that space. And you folks that are here, we'll have you just kind
So
of...
bottom of page 5, physical and structural recovery. Yeah, if you guys wanna, one of you could pop over here. Have partners there, that'd be super helpful. Or easy at your side over here.
Everybody.
Love it. Come on.
And then in that 5 minutes, again, the goal is to review all 3 sections, which are the immediate, short, and long-term needs.
Students to do it.
And
Perfect.
let's see if this will work.
Oh, I'll get it for you, you're good.
Oh.
Here you go. All right, we'll come back at 1:45. Oh, wow.
Oh, I don't know.
Fancy. Yeah, that's what was happening with the videos earlier.
Do that.
Cold water for some reason, and I wasn't ready for that. I watched.
Yeah,
Tried
just
so hard.
minimize that screen, that whole screen. There you go.
Okay, pretend like that's a countdown. 5 minutes.
Oh no.
And do you want me to hit?
I call risk management to help
Okay, about 2 more minutes, everybody.
It's on the School Safety Center resources page.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, we're going to come back. Folks that are online, we're coming back together. We have a question in the room. Go ahead.
Well, I'm looking at like policies governing physical memorials, policies, responding to spontaneous memorials. Some of these things, I don't think are the most critical parts of what we do to run a school. Does all of these things, are these like, yes, every one of these must be addressed in your policy?
I love the memorials question because it can be one of the most sensitive for certain situations. And so my guidance would be anything that you can think through in advance should be thought through in advance. Spontaneous memorials, that's going to be under short term, that's going to be the third one down. A spontanease memorial.
I have examples. We've had it happen.
Yeah. What did you guys do?
Well, I mean, kids will do spontaneous memorials when the class pet dies. Okay?
Yeah.
This is something that anybody who's in education is like, oh yeah, these things pop up, or they're, well, we had a kid who committed suicide and the mother came and had put something up without talking to us on our main gate.
Yeah.
When we got to school in the morning. And it was luckily before the kids had come to school and we were able to take that down, right? We were like, this isn't appropriate, right? And how it was.
Yeah.
Done. So, I mean, it was kind of not a huge issue for us because we were able to, but I'm just thinking in the big scheme, like, do all of these things need to be included? I get planning ahead. I think so many things are
Sure.
the physical,
Again, I would just point back to if these things, and again, every emergency situation or is going to be different. If we don't have policies in place to manage them, we can't believe that these things are just going to solve themselves easily on the other end. Now, you might have had a parent very upset because you took that down. And imagine if that parent wasn't just one parent, imagine it was the 5 students. You might have an uproar.
It wasn't a current student, it was a student who had gone on.
Absolutely. The idea is just like, boy, that sure sounds insensitive. You just took it down? Well, why did you take it down? Because you just felt like it? No, we took it down because our policy in advance reflects what we do on our campuses, right? And it's not because the student died by suicide. It's because we don't do spontaneous memorials on our campus.
Policies don't always make parents feel mad because it makes you say your policy is stupid.
Yeah.
You have all the policies in the world.
Right, I
Parents
guess
just about it. They don't care.
Right, right. But also this brings up a point of spontaneous memorials versus physical structural memorials that you might want to put in place. And if you decide to plant a tree for a student that you lost, are you prepared to plant a tree for every student that was then died in your school? I don't know. All I know is that we need to think it through in advance, both spontaneous memorials and physical memorials that might be appropriate for later. There's a lot of schools that I've seen put on events, or host a tournament in honor of a certain student that might have been lost. Yeah, I'm not telling you what to do, but I am telling you to think it through and make sure your policies reflect that.
Yeah, and we have a question online of where this resource can be found. Amy did link it in the chat for you, and that should take you straight to the PDF. However, it lives under the Utah School Safety Center Resources tab. However, I'll be transparent, that tab's a little tricky. So when you hit resources, there's a few tabs at the top. And I think there's an overview tab, and I think the next one is like policies. You'll have to click on that subheading of policies to get to the link of this resource. Yeah.
What was your name?
I'm Deborah.
Deborah, I appreciate the questions. And to maybe just say one more thing about every single one of these. These are prompting questions to have you think through the areas that are required.
Mm-hmm.
Take what is useful and disregard the rest.
Well, like Lincoln said, he said, really thinking about what questions are we asking and what potential problem are we trying to solve.
Right.
Making sure those things are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if we haven't spent any time thinking these things through, we should, and your decisions are your decisions. It's local control, which I love in this state, but also understand that we can get ahead of some problems in some scenarios. We should.
Yeah, and this is a guide. This is what we've found, the things that we should be thinking of best practices throughout our research. Please know that per rule, if you want to get technical into rule, the requirement for recovery plans is to have all 4 components, and then each component to think through immediate, short-term, long-term. I would say that's where the requirement ends. However, we try to provide some guidance on what specific things to think through in each of those components and timeframes.
Based on the evidence, based on the research.
Yes.
So, any other questions that came up during this section? Any gaps? Anything that you want to highlight? Both folks in the room or anybody online?
We still have questions about some kind of model policy. And my suggestion might be that schools work together to try to hammer this out as a cohort of schools that are similar in size or similar in nature, and see if we can kind of go at it that way. We can try to work with the association maybe and see if they have any guidance that they can give, but we understand that USP can't make policy or make model policies, yeah. 2
more things on that particular question real quick. When there is a district or a model policy that we feel is worthy of sharing, we will share it. We will connect you to the people that are doing this work really well. The second thing is if you ever want eyes on your recovery plan, send it our way. We will review it. We'll offer some technical assistance. I've done that for districts. Like I said, most districts are finding they have the majority of elements in place. It's just about formalizing it to one central place. Okay, let's dig into the next section. We'll do another 5-minute round, and this one will be the business services and recovery section. One of the pieces about this, it is the biggest section, will be the communication piece. So have fun, dig in. We'll do 5 minutes again.
Yeah, so if you're online, take some time to go through it on your own, hit the check, or the yes or the no, assign it to the role, maybe circle it if you need to come back to it. Those folks in the room, if you want to get together again, bring your packets over and go through this together. That would be super helpful. So.
Okay, 5 minutes. Okay, about 2 more minutes on this section. Folks online, 2 more minutes. Okay, as we're wrapping up and coming back together, let's share our thoughts. Where are we at on this particular section? What did you notice? Is there any gaps or anything that was highlighted? And folks online, I would love to hear from you. I know we got at least 41 of you in the room. So what did you notice? Or please push back if you're
Okay, we have a question. Woo!
you're interested. Yeah.
Questions. A question. What is an internal after-action debrief?
I love that question. Ashley, you want to take it?
Yeah, I would love to take it, yeah. So this is actually a legislative duty from your school safety and security specialist. So this past, not this past session, but the one before that in 2025, organizing an after-action debrief is something that your school safety and security specialist is supposed to be in charge of when your school has experienced a significant security compromise. The word significant is subjective, local control, so what's significant to you might be something different than what's significant to an LEA across the way at the other side of the state. So when something happens, or there was an event that happened, you had to deploy, you had to ask law enforcement to come, or maybe EMS, things like that. After the event is over and everyone, all of the immediate things are done, we're looking at hosting an internal after-action debrief. So the members of your building incident command system, so probably your school principal or your school safety specialist, maybe your SRO or whoever your armed school guardian or armed school personnel is, and maybe on the scale of the event, maybe your LEA director and things like that, they're all going to come together and debrief the event. What worked well? So what plans do you have in place that were executed exactly how you were expecting them to? What gaps did you find? Because we all know that unfortunately there is no perfect crisis. There are going to be gaps, there are going to be holes, there are going to be things that didn't go as planned or as well. Maybe you found out that the number you had listed for the mental health professional office is disconnected. The number you had on file is no longer the active number. So that is something you need to debrief and reflect on. The point is not to point fingers or cause blame. It's opportunities to learn and to grow and to enhance our safety plans.
Yes, and can I hope that answers the question. The person in that box should be your school safety and security specialist, so
Yep.
it's an easy who's responsible for it. But the other thing to note about this debrief, it is an internal conversation that is protected and not able to be
Grandma.
And the reason for that is because of the nature of the conversations that are going to take place.
Yeah.
Question in the room. Did you have a question?
Oh no, in my head, I immediately wrote, like, who's gonna do it with staff, families? Like, in my mind, we were doing the debrief to, like, talk to your staff, your families, your students even.
Yeah.
Because the conversation I have with the family is gonna be different than the conversation I might have with my students.
Yeah, and that's really important as well.
But that's not what this is talking about.
No, you're right. This one is more about the operation side of it and what worked well, who was where they were supposed to be when they were supposed to be there, who wasn't, what was the delay. You found out your walkie-talkies don't go beyond 150 feet. Let's manage that. You found out you should probably have 4 more walkie-talkies because this person, and this person didn't have one, so they had to share one with each other. Things like that.
This also, to note, this is in the short term, so this should be days to weeks. We want this to be fresh in the minds of the folks that are having the conversation. And again, this should be, I'm the mental health guy, so I'm going to say it, but it should be a safe space for this conversation to take place without placing blame or pointing fingers.
Because we all believe that we're all doing our best in the moment with what we have when we have it. So
Can we advance to slide 1? Yes, this is the section we're talking about there, the conducting internal action. Any other questions online that pop up?
Yes, I have another question.
Before we move on to that, can I say one more thing? The same page where you have this resource on the School Safety Center website, we actually did a training with specialists last year. It was their first training last year that said, hey, this is your new legislative duty, and we created an after-action debrief template for them to use to conduct that debrief. That template is on the School Safety Center website, resources. I think this document, the emergency guide, is just under the after action debrief template. It's a fillable PDF. You don't have to use it. You don't turn that into the state or anything like that. It is simply a guidance. Take what works, leave what doesn't. Thank you.
All right, next question. What would updating policies to incorporate new understanding of safety look like?
Yeah, what did you learn?
What's a new understanding of safety? What we learned from having a disaster, like vulnerabilities, or is that not what you're looking for?
Yeah, and I think the answer is yeah. Anything that is learned that could be done better should be reflected in policy. Maybe it's you didn't have an MOU in place with a certain entity that was necessary in that situation.
What's an MOU, Scott?
MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. So recovery, during the recovery space, is not a place to engage in creating MOUs. They're taking the MOU and putting it into action. So if you don't have an MOU with, say, a local mental health authority or a community provider, and the nature of your emergency goes beyond the capacity of what your school mental health folks can manage, then that's probably something that you would note and say, we need to have an MOU in place. The one underneath that just says maintaining those community partnerships in the long term. So yes, I think it is just what was learned and how do we incorporate the new understanding of what was learned into our policies.
Yeah, I actually think that bullet point is perfect that it comes right after almost the internal debrief, right? Because you have the internal debrief to talk about what happened, what those gaps were, what you learned in the short term, and then in the long term, how do you make new policies around those things?
Good questions online. Any more?
I don't have any right now.
Okay. Great. Well, for the last section, which is health and well-being, we're going to do that all together. And again, this is the one that I think most of us go to. And the question is, like, what should our responsibility be to this particular need, this particular area? If I go back and read what the actual board rule definition is, if I can find it here in my paperwork, it is going to be conducting services Oh, no, that's not it. That's, and staff. What is the board rule?
Connecting students and staff to support services after emergency.
In board rule, and if you don't mind pulling that up, I want the language from R277-400. It is asking schools to be aware of community resources that are available. It's not saying that your sole responsibility is to make sure that the mental health needs are now being met based on an emergency that happened in your school. We don't think that this is a school alone issue, and we don't intend, and the language in the rule didn't intend for you to do it all and lift this on your own. You have to know the resources available. You have to have strong referral pathways. You have to have maybe a way internally for you to assess for these things, but it's not yours alone to manage. Is that what the language says on the screen?
On the screen.
Means coordinating adequate support. So your job is to coordinate adequate supports to all members of the whole school community after emergency. You just got to be aware. You got to know what's available. That's the basis for the starting point for this conversation. Because health and well-being is asking in the immediate, do you know how to do first aid and CPR? I hope you do. I'm going to include bleed control kits on that since we have bleed control kits now out to all our schools. We have to know how to give immediate first aid. And do you know how to implement psychological first aid to individuals that are affected?
Oh, USB crisis.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they'll send a whole crew to your school.
Absolutely.
It's
Yes.
really great.
So for folks online, if you didn't hear that, USB crisis team can be deployed and is available. Psychological first aid. I'll say this from my clinical lens. What happens at the time of a crisis will echo with a person for years to come. How we respond, what we do. We, as the adults in the room, need to be able to meet folks who are experiencing trauma at that time with the appropriate response. And I will say, just because something disastrous happens doesn't mean someone's going to be traumatized by that. It's actually more likely that they will be fine with the right supports in place and the right protective factors in place. Healing and growth, and actually post-traumatic growth, is much more likely to happen, but post-traumatic stress can happen. We can minimize that by the appropriate response in the immediate. So psychological first aid, it's a training out there. Go look into it. Know how to and what to do. And if you're working with first graders and kindergartners, boy, I sure hope you're ready to sit down with a teddy bear or a blanket, or if it's a high school kid, blankets are still good. You might still have like a cup of something warm. For staff members, let's grab a coffee and I'll sit with you as we go through this real quick. These kinds of things are very helpful for people as we are biologically wired to respond to these heightened situations. We can do a lot in the immediate with that. Also, protocols for assessing staff and students' health and well-being. So how do you do that? Do you check in on that? What is your process for that? And I do know that most of our districts do have support for their staff members through employee assistance programming. Is that adequate? Do we know how to access that? Do we need to think about other options? I don't know. Okay, let's go to the next section in this. Remember when I showed you the model of it was the Sampson model, the stages of recovery? Short term is likely when the honeymoon period is ending and we're starting to see some of those potential disruptions that we want to monitor for. How do we monitor that? Within schools, we might see a dip in grades, we might see a dip in attendance. You also might, within your school, be checking in on students in other ways. There's at least a couple school districts that I know that have 2 times a year teachers that do observational surveys on their students, on their behavior, and they record that. That might, post-disaster, might be a time to implement one of those surveys to make sure that teachers are observing for behaviors. some schools, a lot of schools throughout our state, are doing mental health check-in nights, right? Where we have folks from the community or folks internally do depression, anxiety, and suicide ideation assessments. This post-disaster might be a really good time to implement one of those. Okay. Any questions online or anything? We're going to get to the long term. Just want to double check so we're not skipping anybody. But long term, when we start thinking about the health and well-being and behavioral recovery on the long-term scale, this is the one area that's probably the largest area for long-term thinking. We want to have continuing monitoring. We want to have embedded activities that promote health and healing into the school culture. I don't know if anybody is it Frank DeAngelis? D'Angelo. And the work that he did post-Columbine. Now, he was the principal for Columbine. And what he did to bring that school back to a place of community and healing afterwards is a master's class in embedding activities that promote healing. I hope none of us ever have to have that be something that we have to do, but we need to think about it in advance for what can we do that's helpful to this space of recovery. Continued referral pathways within the community providers, that's going to be a constant theme within this. If you don't know who your local mental health authority resources are, if you don't, please think about that. Get to know what programming they offer, get to know what services they offer. For those of you who don't know, there are 13 different local mental health authorities in our state. Part of their mandated duties is to work with schools, to help coordinate with schools, and the majority of them have really good school-aged programming for this. They're the experts in it. You don't have to know how to do it, but I would say know the name of the folks that are in the building. It's going to be easier in the long run if you have a relationship and connection of who does what and where. And then considerations, we've talked about this for permanent versus temporary memorials. And so I won't belabor that point. I think we've talked about that. Anything else, Ashley, as we're wrapping this up?
Yeah, so to finish off this handout here, we don't have a screenshot of it, so online you just have to follow with me. Go ahead and turn to the page all the way to the end when it starts to go in purple. We have this idea of scoring. Now this is just for the folks that, like me, I used to teach math, so I'm a very logic-minded brain. I want to score. How am I doing? I want to see themes and patterns and help me. We helped you. We got you. So there are two different ways to get a score here, and that is by each individual component. So for example, if I go in the academics component, if I look at all of the questions, there's going to be a total of 10 questions there. How many did you say yes to? That's your numerator, divided by 10, turn it into a percentage. That's your percentage on your recovery for academics recovery planning. So you can do that for each 4 of your components. Look at the themes there. Hey, we've got academics really well. We kind of need to look at structural and physical recovery and maybe spend some time there. Or, to see other themes, you could get scores across the 3 different time frames. So you can add up all of the immediate questions, divide it by 16. All of the short-term questions, there are 17, so that's your denominator. And then add up all of the yeses in the long term, which has 11 questions. And then you can get individual scores for the individual time frames. And you might notice, hey, our short-term recovery, perfection. It actually is excellent if you look at the legend down there. But our immediate, it might be developing. Okay, so this is just a guide for you. We're not trying to give you a score of yes or no. Like I said, you don't have to turn this into the state, but it's just an objective way to put yourself on the map of where you're at in that time.
Yeah, give you an idea of where you are possibly at and where you might want to start to improve. We do have a couple other additional resources that before we finish, we want to make sure you are aware of that directly impact this. Do you want to talk about the healing after school?
Yeah, so our prevention team put together a toolkit called Healing Our Schools After a Loss. It focuses mainly on student death or teacher death or death in the school community. However, it has a really good examples of policies. For example, memorials is in there. So we will send Amy that. Are you sending a follow-up email? We'll send you a link to that toolkit. It's on our prevention side of the website. And then our School Safety Center specialist, Michelle Knight, she also Utahized a LEA communications toolkit that is absolutely phenomenal. So we worked nationwide with folks to get best practices to create templates, text message templates, email templates, and voice templates if you send out robocalls for different events at your school. We cover all of the SRP events, but also some of those unique one-off events, whether it's student injury, fight, bomb threat, things like that. This packet is probably like 30, 40 pages. And it's in 10 different languages. So I will send the link to Amy for the version in English, and then I'll send also the other link where you can see the rest of the 9 languages, which represents the other most popular 9 languages throughout Utah.
They're all under your resources.
Pardon?
All of these things are under your resources.
Those last 2 are underneath the prevention team resources. Yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate you guys inviting us out, and I will just end with just re-emphasizing that what we can do in advance will be extremely important, because when crisis hits, when disaster hits, there's a lot of moving pieces. There's things happening that come from left field, and if we can have a plan in place that really does focus on what's probable, not what's possible, but what's probable in our space, we will do a better job responding, and we will be better prepared to help our students and our schools, school communities recover from these issues and these incidents. So I appreciate you guys having us out. Any last questions online?
There was one last question about recommendations for MOUs that schools might consider putting into place. Like what kind of organizations or what kind of resources might be good to plan for in the event of a trauma or whatever?
Yeah. So one thing that I will say is that there is a generic MOU. There's talk of a generic MOU example that should be going out in the next little while. And so when that comes up, that'll be great. But 2 different agencies that I will say you should have MOUs with are your mental health authorities or your local providers that you choose to work with for the mental health piece, and also your law enforcement folks. You may also be thinking about hospitals or other situations, or again, depending on the nature of your school. But the memorandum of understanding is just to make sure that you're clear on who does what and when, what that looks like. Maybe even costs are decided in that in advance, so that you're not trying to solve that on the back end of a crisis.
And I will say our liaison with DPS, the Department of Public Safety, Lieutenant Barnes, he does have a school SRO model policy up on his website, which is out of the State Security Division. Is that what it's called? We could send that to Amy as well.
I'll get that on the list.
Yes.
But thank you. I'm glad we're spending some time thinking about this. I hope this is encouraging to start a conversation with your districts and with your agencies to make sure where we need to be.
Yeah, thanks guys.
Thanks guys.
Okay, give me just a minute while we switch presentations again and take a short break.
Okay, greetings, everyone. Well, in the room and online. Appreciate that. Any of you go to conferences this summer? I don't know, went to a couple, UAPCS one maybe, yeah? The Charter Conference in Layton, or, I don't know, I went to a couple out-of-state conferences. The great thing about conferences is never the sessions. I shouldn't say never. Sometimes the sessions are good. This one will probably be a mediocre session. The value of conferences is getting together, right? Talking to people, being in the same place as people that you don't see very often, but you have a lot in common with because your days are the same. You're worried about a lot of the same things. So I know today this meeting is right as school's starting. So no shade on anything, but to the degree that you can prioritize coming down to be with your colleagues, I do think that would be really beneficial to the movement, probably to most of you as individuals. So just kind of a plug for trying to make time to come down when you can. I think you'll find some value from just the interaction, the spontaneous conversations and discoveries that you can make just when you're around a bunch of people who do what you do all day. So anyway, thank you for that. We're pleased to have you here, pleased to have you online. I'm going to start about half of my little speech here, and our interactive session together will be about the Senate Bill 241 literacy funding. That really only applies to elementary schools. So for the first little bit of this, those of you who don't teach any of grades K through 3, this will be informative but not necessarily applicable to you. But then we'll move on, and the second half of this will be just kind of about general policy updates about legislation that passed last year that's being put in place, and some actions that the State Board of Education is taking, what the legislature is doing so far, what things might look like, what we're facing, what we're dealing with, what might be coming up. So Senate Bill 241 was a big bill that reformed literacy in primary grades. And it was Senator Ann Milner was the sponsor, and she had run several literacy bills before. In fact, this bill really gutted her previous major reading bill, redistributed the money, refocused. She's always been big on the science of reading and on letters. She carried the bill that required letters as the state's curriculum 5 or 6 years ago, something like that. And letters and the science of reading are still the base of this, but how money was allocated, what it was for, has totally changed. I'd like to point out a political reality. Senator Ann Milner has been a great friend to education, widely respected in education and at the legislature. This was her last session because she's not running again. So after 12 years in the legislature, this bill was guaranteed to pass no matter what was in it. So just know that going in, right? It actually was a fairly controversial bill. And one of the big controversial parts about that bill is the retention piece, which I'm sure if you teach grades K through 3, you know about. It's not in place, I think, until 3 or 4 years from now. So I think like 2030 or 2031 is when the retention piece comes in if kids aren't reading at 3rd grade level by the end of 3rd grade. This bill essentially requires retention, at least for reading. That was a very controversial part of the bill. But nobody was going, I shouldn't say nobody. It was going to pass because we all love Senator Milner. So I think that was the most controversial part of the bill. But another part of the bill that is really specific to charter schools was also unfortunate, but again, it was bound to pass. And so it's something we'd like to try to work on in the future. But in Senate Bill 241, $15 million was allocated to school districts, either directly to the districts or through regional education service agencies for school districts. Now, some of you online may actually, as charter schools, belong to a regional education service agency. But charter schools were taken out of that calculation. And so RESAs only receive funding for their school district members. And only school districts are receiving funding directly if they don't belong to an education service center, which is mainly Wasatch Front and pretty large school districts. In addition to that $15 million, $1 million was carved out that went to the State Charter School Board, with direction that the Charter School Board would, in consultation with other charter school authorizers, distribute this to charter schools for training, coaching, and literacy improvement. So that's what charters got, $1 million. We got 1/16 of the funding, even though we educate a little over 1/8 of the students. And actually a greater percentage, about 1/7 of the K through 3 students, right? Because charters as a whole tend to skew younger. So we are getting less than half the amount per student as school districts are. And that, I think, is unfortunate and a problem that we can solve. But where we are today is the State Charter School Board was tasked with, you have $1 million to help charter schools improve reading scores. What are you going to do? Would you move to the next slide? And I will do the same on mine. So this is what the State Charter School Board considered and proposed and voted on in June. You can see it there. I'm not going to read it word for word, but essentially we would take that $1 million and invest it by hiring reading coaches that can travel out to the charter schools and work with any K through 3 teachers and paraprofessionals in your school, teaching them in the science of reading. It's not part of educator licensure. Most educators have not been trained in the science of reading. In fact, I think there are only 3 people who are currently licensed in the state as certified with the science of reading. So we would be working to build this capacity by hiring those people, getting them trained in the science of reading with some of the authorized helpers, which in this case would be the Center for the School of the Future. It's housed at Utah State University. And then we would work with the Charter School Resource Center, which was set up in a separate bill, to just send all of those charter literacy coaches out to your schools, work with you, schedule times, come in and do classroom observations, direct teacher training, data gathering, and really help you over the course of this year by getting your teachers all trained up, and especially working with you as directors to identify who are your top teachers that should get extra training, right? Kind of a train the trainer kind of a model. And in that way, work to invest in the capacity of charter schools to teach the science of reading and thereby raise reading scores across the state. That was the proposal that the State Charter School Board adopted in June. I want to go over why and talk about the process that we used to arrive at that decision. And the first and most obvious thing is $1 million is really tiny. It works out to be about $33 or so, but that's using fiscal year 2026 enrollment numbers. 2025, and then, but we're in fiscal year 2027 now, and so, assuming that the K through 3 population in Utah's charter schools will grow, that number is actually going to decline a bit on a per student basis. But if you think about it, that's $30 to teach the science, to use the science of reading for a kid for the entire year, right? In a classroom of 25 students, so that's a few $100, maybe $1,000, right? To teach those kids reading, and for a school really with even 400 students, right? It's a decent sized charter school, 400 students in grades K through 3, that's 4 sections of 25 students each. That would get you about a little over $12,000, which is maybe enough to hire a quarter-time paraprofessional. It just became obvious that with this small amount of money distributed as widely that it needed to go, direct pass-through to schools would just really have no impact on reading scores. But that if we pooled those resources for reading coaches and then took all of that, pooled the teachers together and assigned, would hire about 10 reading coaches to get out into the charter schools, we could spread those around and really leverage those dollars in a better way by training teachers rather than training students, and then allowing your teachers to do that training of students. So we think that aligned well with the literacy goals, and by partnering with the Charter School Service Center that is also being set up at the same time, We could probably avoid some internal delays that are related to a lot of things that make state funding more complicated, but particularly complicated at the State Charter School Board. If you guys think it's hard for you to follow state purchasing and hiring laws, just wait until you come up here, where it is a nightmare. And we can do very little with money that is actually, it's like in statute. Send this to the State Charter School Board. But what that means in practice is the State Board of Education holds it. So there's been some discussion that maybe the Charter School Education Service Center is not the right pathway to go. And I think we'll kind of reach a final decision on that next week. But so far, what charter schools can plan on is, over the course of this fall and winter, we will be building up the capacity of the charter school literacy coaches by hiring them and getting them trained, and then probably in early 2027, deploying those coaches out to your schools. And at the same time, working with the legislature to recognize that funding charter school students to improve reading scores only half as much as we fund school districts is not really the way to get adequate results. And so we'll be looking for an additional appropriation so that we can beef that up, which we think would make another part. Do want to point out, through this process, we obviously didn't have meetings with all charter schools, but we met with focus groups of charter schools. We met at the State Charter School Conference in Layton. We talked with other authorizers. By the way, for K through 3 schools that offer those grades, there really aren't that many authorizers. There's just State Charter School Board that authorizes almost all of them. There's Weber State University that authorizes a kindergarten program that is housed with their educator licensure program up there. It has 60 students only in kindergarten. And then Logan City School District that authorizes Edith Bowen. Granite also authorizes, and Salt Lake City School District. They authorize the open classroom. Granite School District is becoming the authorizer of Ames, but otherwise does not authorize an elementary school, unless one of you tell me I'm wrong, but I think I'm right. So we could pretty broad agreement that this is the right way to go. If you weren't consulted about that directly, and you have input, you have maybe a week left to share that input. But it seems pretty clear that just a direct distribution of dollars to charter schools will not meet the goals of the legislation. And I don't think that the state charter school can, with a straight face, go before the legislature to make a report and say, we decided that the best way was to give every student $30 and let that improve their reading scores. I just don't think that the legislature would think that that was a very good use of money. But pooling those resources to really train up and build the capacity of charter schools to do this on their own, I think will get better reviews, but we welcome your comments. Again, 10 literacy coaches. We plan to develop them, get them trained, and then send them to you to get your teachers trained and get the science of reading into your classrooms beginning this year, but really with full implementation and hopefully with more resources in the 27-28 school year. Okay? Are there any questions about that, either online or here in the room?
I don't have any online.
Okay.
If anything comes in, I'll let you know.
I'm going to count that I explained that very well, rather than that everybody got interrupted during the presentation. Okay, thank you. So anyway, here you see a calendar. Again, we're working hard. I would say, talk to your legislators over the course, as the legislative session is in place. $1 million for charter schools to do this while districts get twice as much is just insufficient. And that's $1 million we'd like to be able to find. I'll talk more about money a little bit later as we talk about a legislative policy update. Here's kind of an outline of where we expect to spend that money in the budget. 10 literacy coaches at $785,000 is not very much money, but again, we're not anticipating that those will be employed for a full year in the current year, right? It's going to take some time to get them hired and stood up and trained. But there you see the budget for how that's going to be done. And because these people are going to be traveling statewide, there's a pretty significant portion in there for mileage reimbursements and hotels. We'll probably hire people that are located in southern Utah, in eastern Utah, in northern Utah, so that everybody gets their fair share. Okay? I'll just skip that slide. Okay. let's talk about some other policy issues if we can. Also last year, in addition to Senate Bill 241, Senate Bill 186 passed. And this was a charter school specific bill. Senator Heidi Baldery, I don't remember who it was in the House, but it was ostensibly the bill about charter school funding. And as it was initially drafted, it was done with the goal of fixing the long-term problem that we've been dealing with for several years, that charter schools are small LEAs. Small district LEAs get significant dollars on the administrative support side because there's recognition that if you're in Daggett, you only have 100 and some odd students, or North and South St. Pete, they're pretty small school districts, but they have the same compliance standards and administrative responsibilities as much larger school districts. So those small school districts get a significant boost in administrative funding that charter schools have historically not gotten. At some level, you can understand why. Every time we create a new charter school, we create a new small LEA, and eventually that exponential growth would just eat up all funding available for it. But we do need to find a solution to it. The legislature has funded this one time for several years, and again, Senate Bill 186 was an effort to try to get that solved on an ongoing basis. It did not work. So that part was taken out of the bill, and charter school administrative base funding was funded once again on a one-time basis. And instead, Senate Bill 186 established a working group at the State Board of Education that would do a deep dive into school funding formulas and find out where charter schools are getting the short shrift. And as that working group has been meeting, the answer largely seems to be that charter schools are not getting a short shrift. There's been a lot of progress. Charter school students in the main are funded like their school district counterparts. There are differences, however. School districts tend to be more geographic, and so you'll find places like Ogden and Salt Lake City where they have very large at-risk populations, and those schools get a ton of at-risk money. But it's just because charter school students in the main don't qualify demographically for those funds. There are some issues where charter schools have advantages. Special education is one. School districts have a cap on their special education prevalence rate, and charter schools don't. That's partly designed to help schools like Spectrum, where it's like we're essentially a school for special education students. But as you guys all know, lots of charter schools have a prevalence rate of special education more than 14%. It's pretty common for charter schools to open with a fairly low prevalency rate. But after 5 or more years, I think what people who have kids with disabilities find is the district bureaucracy really gets in the way of my kids getting service. And at this charter school, there's much less of that bureaucracy. The teachers still care, the special education director still cares, the LEA director still cares, but there's so much less bureaucracy that I'm finding what I'm needing, and I'm telling all my friends. And so you do have a lot of charter schools with prevalency rates in the 20% and 30% range. And charter schools receive funding for all of those students in a way the districts would not if they were over 14.1. But there are 2 identified areas at this point where charter school funding is obviously limited by the way the law is written. And one of those is in career and technical education. This will obviously apply much more to secondary schools and elementary schools, but there are really high levels of base enrollment that you need in order to qualify for these funding. Most charter school LEAs simply don't qualify, so they don't receive the funding. There are also limitations on charter school centers, that you might be able to say, hey, we want to build an auto shop, or have our kids with some electrician. And large school districts can build these because, I'm Jordan School District, I've got 40,000 kids, and we basically built a high school that is just our CTE high school. And in fact, Jordan District has 2 of those. And they'd like to build a 3rd, but they run into some of these same problems because funding only flows to centers like that have a complete suite of offerings. And so that creates a problem. for the ongoing funding of those programs, right? If a charter school just wanted to build something for, an auto shop or electrical or something like that, or if you're East Hollywood and you want to build something for film production, there's just not the funding available to fund the ongoing costs of those programs. So that is something that we're working to try to develop legislative fixes for coming up in the next legislative session. But the state board, we were so happy about this, and we worked with them on this, pointing out this problem. And so in the state board rule that implements the Apex Center funding, I hope you guys know what that is. It's an acronym, and I don't remember what it stands for. But it's essentially state money to build big CTE centers. Providence Hall, working with several other charter schools, I don't mean to just name drop Providence Hall, but that's where we had these meetings where we talked about it. So I know there are other schools involved, AAI and East Hollywood, I think Rockwell, and I know there are some others, so forgive me for not mentioning everybody. But they put together a consortium application, which is a really big deal, to be able to let charter schools build something of a CTE center that is really a bunch of remote locations that they want to work out so that they can transport students and take advantage of like a charter school CTE facility network in a way that is really, that I think is really beneficial. So the state board was able to solve that for Apex Center funding, but we still don't have a solution in law for the ongoing funding, and that's something that we're currently working on. Another kind of emergent policy issue happened at the State Board of Education meeting last week when in their Friday afternoon board meeting, the state board adopted a recommendation, which is typical for them, right? They don't have the power to change statutes, so they will vote saying, we recommend that the legislature change this, and then, they write a letter, they put it on their legislative priority list, and essentially lobby for it. And they were, this change would require that charter school administrators get school administrative licensure in a way that's currently required in school districts. It's never been required in charter schools, but this is a motion that the State Board of Education took. I'm forgetting that I actually had slides on this. So you move ahead to the one that says administrative licensure on the side. Yeah. So in addition to requiring licenses for charter administrators, this motion and this recommendation, if it was implemented, would also require educator licensure for speech therapists, speech pathologists. Those are currently licensed through the Department of Occupational and Professional Licensing, or DOPL, which I think I have that acronym up there. But giving full credit to the arguments in favor of this motion at the State Board of Education meeting, it seems like what the State Board was trying to get at is one aspect of licensure for teachers is not just the training, but the tracking. That the State Board keeps track of professional complaints, right? I mean, if a teacher is abusive to students, that is part of that teacher's licensure record. There were complaints, there were findings, there was a process by which that happened. Educators like that by the State Board can be stripped of their licenses. I think the effort is to try to take that tracking and accountability aspect and move it to other people who work in schools but aren't currently licensed. So there's more than that. There are like CTE licensures and things like that. There are a lot of professionals who work in schools, both charter and district, that do not have educator licenses. And independent of the training, members of the State Board were concerned about being able to track that. If there was a complaint filed against a speech therapist and that speech therapist was let go by one school, there's just no centralized record of that for other schools to know about. But this would impact any speech therapists that are employed directly by you. But since charter schools often don't have that, it would also apply to any that are just, maybe they do a private practice and you just contract with them for 10 or 15 hours a week. It would also apply to that. And that way it might limit the supply of speech therapists that would be available for schools, independent of the others. And then, of course, the administrative licensure, because independent of the wisdom of that policy, it's never been a requirement, and I think a lot of charter school directors currently don't have that license, and so it might have a major impact on charter schools' current operations. So that's just a recommendation. The legislature would have to pass this. My own read is that would be kind of a unlikely thing to have happen. But I've also been hearing that the State Board of Education, hearing the arguments on that day, that yeah, that makes sense, but as there's been more thought and concern expressed about it, I am hearing that there's a likelihood that the State Board will move to reconsider that action in a future board meeting, and we will see what happens. Are there any thoughts that anybody has about charter school administrative licensure that they'd like to share on that at this point in the meeting before we move on at all?
I don't have anything online.
Okay, then you can move to the next slide. All right. I want to just give you a legislative update. This says August, but that's just because it is August. So I went back and combed through the minutes and the reports that I've sent out about what the legislature and the State Board of Education talked about in May and June. You should take July off at both levels in August. So just kind of gonna give you a sense. Just because this is what they've talked about in their interim session, it doesn't necessarily mean that this is what bills and things are going to be about or what policies might be changed. But special education funding has been a topic at all legislative committee meetings this year, or of their interim committee meetings for the entire year. That's 3 interim committee meetings and 2 appropriations committee meetings. This was a high priority for the State Superintendents and State School Boards Association. Last year, it didn't pass, but on the funding side, there's real concern in the school community, in our public education community, that special education is pretty underfunded, and that's especially true for students who require a higher degree of intervention and services, and that there are more of those students than there used to be. And so it's always been the case, and probably always will be, that funding will be calculated on averages, right? And you fund one student at one level, and they might not use all their services, but another student is going to need more, and it just kind of comes out in the wash. But as we see more and more students requiring by law more and more services, and part of that is because the definition of disability is expanding. The services and expectations and court rulings have expanded that pool. I think what we're seeing is that the average is skewing higher than it used to do. And so services might become more expensive, so there's a sense that we need to address some of that issue. Otherwise, money that is appropriated to serve students in general is going to be siphoned off, go to this other program, and in that way we're kind of shortchanging the majority of the students in order to focus on the higher immediate needs of a smaller percentage. And we would like to be able to serve all students adequately. I hope I'm framing that argument in a fair way. At the meeting yesterday, there was a question of, well, yeah, maybe the state isn't providing full funding for charter school students, but maybe that's not so bad because school districts should have some skin in this game as well. So there's arguments to be had. But it is a big topic, and I imagine that there will be, discussion, and I'm positive that there will be legislation about that this year. Representative Tracy Miller, who's from South Jordan, she is working on such a bill. She also ran a bill like that last year. Her bill would have attached 3 WPUs to a special ed self-contained student, where now they only bring 2. So it would have attached a 3rd, and then allowed some flexibility to use some of that dollars for that child's, or for general education expenses. The State Board of Education is under their regular 5-year intensive review, and that is every program in the state government goes through an intensive review every 5 years. But the fact that the State Board is under it this year may indicate that there will be some changes coming to State Board funding, kind of the funding of that administration and bureaucracy. I don't mean to say that pejoratively. The state superintendent has been given pretty wide discretion to try to move things around. Normally the legislature sets those things. You can use this for teaching and learning, and this for school lunch, and this for whatever else. But the state superintendent currently has pretty broad authority to say we're going to move money here and there and get right people in the right positions. It's just something to watch out for. I don't know what kind of changes to expect that would actually impact school operations. But I think one goal of this is to try to get the State Board of Education a little bit more right-sized and focused on outcomes. And we'll see what comes from that. But it's been a big discussion on the funding side. And then the last thing that you need to know is not an education issue, but that there is a $300 million deficit in the state's Medicaid program. And that's really kind of combined over a couple of years. So there's a $300 million hole to fill. There's money for that. But there's a $150 million ongoing hole to fill. And that is going to have to come out of new money out of the state budget. There is a contingency, for cost overruns. So that $300 million hole will wipe out that contingency, take some rainy day funds. But ongoing, there's a $150 million bill that is already sitting inside the state's budget that is going to take the lion's share of any excess money for any program in the state. And so that is probably going to leave a lot less money for education than there once used to be, right? So statutorily, there's going to be, there's a guaranteed funding increase on the WPU for enrollment growth, which is flat, right? And for inflation. But beyond that inflationary adjustment, I don't think there will be much money to fund other kinds of programs. And that may impact what ongoing things can be done for charter school administrative costs or any other programs that people might have in the future. Just be aware of that. There's a big bill that's coming due that is going to have to be funded in the state's budget. You can move on. On the policy side, I've written a couple of things that just have been in discussion at the legislative interim committees over the course of the summer. So you'll see that in one of our first meetings, there is a big concern that concurrent enrollment and advanced placement courses both qualify students to receive college credit. But at the higher education level, there's real concern that CE classes are not as rigorous as AP classes. And so students who earn college credits by taking an intensive course and passing a pretty difficult exam come into college much better prepared than students who've taken a CE course. My guess is you'll see some changes there. So for those of you secondary schools that offer AP and concurrent enrollment, be aware. There will be very likely some changes coming on the CE side with the effort to try to make it more rigorous. That may actually fall more on the college partners, rather than on the school. But just be aware that there will probably be legislation about that at this point seems to have pretty broad support among the higher education community that's really concerned about this, and among legislators. There's also a discussion about educator licensure and how valuable is it to have specific teacher training rather than subject matter training. That if you've got a master's degree in mathematics, could that be some sort of faster path, to be able to get a math teaching assignment even if you don't have the separate teacher license? So there may be some information about that. So far, I don't sense that has the same kind of impetus as some of those others, but it has been a discussion, and usually if it's a discussion, it means somebody's going to run a bill. And man, once a bill file is opened, it's like a jury. You never know what they're going to decide. So just be aware. Things catch fire sometimes that we don't expect. Also, at every legislative meeting this year has been a big discussion, and that was especially true this week when the legislature spent a long time talking about the administrative burden. The state board did this too in their August meeting. The administrative burden that is placed on school administrators. Districts have the same complaints, but except for the very small ones, it's not like what charter schools face from an administrative and reporting and bureaucratic standpoint. So there's a real effort to try to get those out. I was, writing the update about the policy committee that met yesterday, and there was a long time in that meeting spent about this. And Representative Jason Thompson, who represents Cache County, he wanted to make sure everybody knows that he is working on this. He wants to eliminate all unnecessary reports. So just be aware that that's coming. If that worked out, it would be great. I will point, he's not the only one who has tried to do this for a while, right? You guys know Susan Pulsifer. She was in the legislature for 8 years, former school board member at Jordan School District. She's on the state charter school board now. This is a big effort for her. She ran bills like this every year. And, it's like you take a chisel, but unlike with the chisel where you chisel it off and then it looks really pretty, it's like, no, because you look at reports. Great, this year we eliminated 10 reports and created 15 new ones, right? So it's just something to watch out for. But it was a very good discussion. And, I think legislators are sincere in their efforts to try to ease that administrative burden, but also caught up in politics and, other things that seem like good ideas at the time. And so the bureaucracy tends to grow over time rather than shrink. That's not true just in education, but it's government. So there's going to be a major policy push on reducing class size. And I feel pretty confident in saying that because the Speaker of the House had some social media posts on it. This seems to be on his mind. And when something is on his mind, that tends to be on the House's mind. So I think you'll see the House of Representatives try to come out with something related to class size reduction. I don't yet know what that will look like. I did attend a policy meeting on it, and there's no form or shape to it yet. But there is a great desire for people to run on the fact that they've reduced class size. And you can understand why that would be. See where that might go. I think the overall policy goal is to try to get elementary school class sizes down under 25 students. Most charter schools tend to use that as a cap on traditional, like in classroom students. Schools tend to have that pretty close to a cap. So if something like that were to pass and charter schools were left out because they already have 25 students per class, that might be, something of a hiccup there that, that we might not support. It's like we're doing this already. Like, don't shut charter schools out just because we're already doing well. Anyway, just something to watch for. And Representative Jordan Tusher, who's from South Jordan, seems to be the House guy that is working most directly on that one. And he's got a bill file open with that title. And then there's a proposal to restructure the state board. This kind of goes along with what we talked about before. In yesterday's interim committee meeting, they brought out a list of combing through the code. I don't know, maybe you guys read this morning. I already emailed this out to you guys. But what has the legislature told the state board they have to do? And I think there were 439 specific tasks or mandates. State board, you're in charge of this. And I've read that list. If you were to read that list, you'd be like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, I get that. They're doing those kinds of things. But on the other hand, it still is 439 things. And the big discussion at the meeting yesterday, because this was generally about administrative burdens, is, each one of those things you could look at and think, yes, it makes sense. The state board should totally do that. But when you do everything, you end up not doing anything well. And again, not trying to throw shade on the State Board of Education, but we all know that if there's too much on your plate, none of it gets done very well, right? Some of it might, but at the sacrifice of other things. And if you try to be all things to all people, you end up being mediocre or worse at everything. That's just my experience. So there's an effort to try to focus the State Board on what its core functions ought to be. Maybe devolve a lot of things down at the local level, try to have accountability placed there rather than at the state level. And there's also a proposal for Senate Bill 241, but for math, right? A focus on early grade mathematics to try to involve, early testing and early interventions with the idea that kids should read at 3rd grade level by the end of 3rd grade, and should also be able to do whatever 3rd graders should do at the end of 3rd grade. Okay? All right. So I went and looked this morning. There are 28 public bill files, requests, with the topic that are categorized as education bills. 28. That's actually very small. But there is also some unknown number of private bills, and there's really no way to count those except to call every member of the legislature and say, do you have any bills that you have not yet made public that are about education? They don't have to tell you. So I think there's no way really to know how many there are. There are 28 public bills. 15 of those are mine, which is why I put this graphic up there. I looked at that number today and was just like, what am I doing? But anyway, there it is. That's a pretty easy thing to find at the state legislative website. There are no publicly open bills that are specific to charter schools. Even though I have one, it's called school closure amendments. It's a very minor change that affects only charter schools, but it's just not classified that way. So there are, and there's some other things in there that might not be education related directly, but that's what's coming up. You'll be able to see what those are, but again, lots of them are still private. In fact, I would say, I won't drop a name here, but since I was at the Capitol yesterday and was overhearing some conversations, one of the staff members was sitting with a legislator saying, we're here to talk about, a lot of bills that you have open. And that legislator has nothing listed on when you look it up publicly. So, there are lots of things being worked on, and there will probably be 100 bills or more that touch education in some way for the coming legislative session. And I will have a lot of them. So that is the end of my presentation on the updates of the early literacy funding and kind of just a sense about where we are on the legislative update. Are there any questions?
I don't see any online. So, thank you.
Okay. Thank you guys. Really appreciate it. And I imagine I'll see you at a future meeting like this. Thank you.
Okay, and we have one more presenter, so give me just a second to switch presentations and we'll turn the time over to Director Hyde.
Yeah.
Okay, you are on. Remember not to stand too close to the owl.
Oh, right.
Because then all it can see
I'll
is
put my water over here then.
your one eyeball. Okay,
It's
so
just such a cute eyeball.
it is. All right. Well, We are so happy to have Dr. Malia Height here as our final presenter today. And I will turn the time over to her. And if you guys have questions online, I am happy to fill those as she goes. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, and feel free to interrupt at any point with any questions. Happy to help. So today we're just going to talk about some of the changes with licensing that happened in this last school year. Start with like a very entry level about educator licensing, and hopefully, and then end with the impact. So, let's see, I have to point it though. Maybe I'm too far away. Oh, there. Okay, there it is. Okay. So one of the things that's very timely right now is USIMS and Cactus, and what are we doing, and what's the timeline? So because of the impact of the educator salary adjustment funding deadline in October, we are suspending our product for USIMS until October. So we're still using Cactus until after the funding deadline. So it is working.
I cannot. I've been trying to log on.
So here's the trick with the remote desktop system. You have to use Microsoft Edge. Occasionally Mozilla Firefox will work if your fingers are crossed just the right way. But Microsoft Edge is the browser that works. Chrome did an update in July and it no longer works.
Okay, then.
So that's why. So you'll like get into the remote desktop system and then it'll just spin the eternal spin of death.
Okay.
Right? So if you use Microsoft Edge, you'll be able to get into Cactus. Now, there are some people who still cannot get it to work, even with Microsoft Edge. If that is your situation, we are holding daily office hours every day from noon to 2. And you can log in, and if we need to just do the changes for you, we can do that. We also have a computer with Cactus loaded on it, and it's a little quicker than the remote desktop system. At our office, that you can say, hey, I'm going to be in Salt Lake on this day. Can I come and use your computer for Cactus? We say yes. We've got somebody coming from Vernal tomorrow to use that computer. So that's available. And then if none of those options work, just call us or email us and we will find an answer. Because we want to make sure that your data is correct and that you get all of the funding that you need and deserve. So that's USIMS and Cactus. I know that's a hot topic right in the moment. Yeah. Okay. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about like what is required per law for licensing. What are some great practices when you're thinking about hiring? Hopefully at this point of the year, the hiring portion is over. Since now we're right in the middle of the school year. Our kids started on Tuesday and Wednesday. So we're going to talk about funding and then also the connection of licensing and educator preparation to student outcomes and teacher retention. So we'll look at some of that data. First of all, there are some resources that are here. These slides are available at this bit.ly, and Amy will send them out also. Yes. But this bit.ly will go straight to the slides so that you can access those whenever you would like. And then we've got the annual training that we did in October was lengthy and comprehensive and went through all of the changes in detail, and that would be a great resource, either the video and the slides. So those are linked here. And then we've got a little guidance document that can help you if you are in a secondary space specifically, making sure that you find people who have the right kind of licenses. Okay, so what is a license? So in the state of Utah, every educator has one license. And then there are license areas of concentration, which is
like, what is your field, or what is your group of students? Are you special ed? Are you elementary? Are you secondary? Are you a school counselor? Those are your license areas. And then we have endorsements that attach. So I have a secondary math endorsement that attaches to my secondary license area, and attaches to my license. Right now in the state of Utah, there's a lot of endorsements. It's very complex. We have I counted this morning, 279 active endorsements in the state of Utah. And the state board meeting that Lincoln referenced that happened a couple weeks ago, part of that direction from the board is that we need to simplify that system. And so we're working on a draft to take to the board that would simplify it to 52 endorsements overall. So we'll see how that shakes. We're still working on it. It would broaden the categories of what people are qualified to do and provide you at the LEA level more flexibility in hiring. So instead of they need this endorsement to teach this class and this endorsement to teach this class and this endorsement to teach this class, they need one endorsement in the field and they can teach it all. So the goal is to have that ready for next school year, maybe sooner. We're hoping by the end of this year, like end of 2026, that it is kind of on the roll to being somewhere. So our tree is going to have a lot fewer leaves, which will be fine. It's a 77% reduction, which is great. I think 77% less red tape is fabulous. So there's 3 levels of licenses in the state of Utah, and these are in code. The professional license is for everybody who's finished. They have finished their preparation. If they're a teacher, they did their student teaching and they're done. Associate is for those who are on the way, meaning they've done something. Maybe they're a content expert. They have a degree in history, then they can teach history at the associate level. And then LEA specific is if they haven't yet met the requirements for the associate, you may still hire them, and your board can request an LEA specific license, and then they would be qualified. And all the same rights and privileges as any other licensed educator. So who needs an educator license? And this is straight out of code. These are all of the different kinds of jobs that happen in schools that require an educator license. There are a few things that have changed. There's like exceptions in code. We've got several that went to DOPL. We'll talk about one of those changes for SLPs and audiology. And then there is an exemption for charter administrators, which we've talked about today. Very timely. So who does not need an educator license? I put up here some of the ones that oftentimes people ask me about. What about my behavior analysts? Is there a way to get an LEA specific license for those guys? At this point, there's not. The State Board of Education doesn't consider them an educator, and so they are functioning in your schools under their DOPL license. Mental health therapists, physical therapists, OTs, PTs, social workers, school nurses, they operate under their professional licensure from DOPL and not under the educator license. Last year, HB 447, which is what started those APEX, those big CTE centers, had a provision that CTE teachers are not required to have a license to teach. So if you want to hire someone who doesn't have a license, great, they can teach CTE, but you have to hire them as a classified employee or a contractor or whatever, but it's a non-licensed employee. That means you give them a background check. It means you hire them just like you would, for example, a paraeducator. You don't put them in Cactus because they're not an educator, they're not licensed, And you're essentially hiring them as a long-term sub to function as a CTE teacher. And then this year was newly added SLPs and audiologists. We'll talk about that a little bit because the transition is going to be fun. So first, I always like to start with why do educators need a license? Or why do they, other than because the law says so, there's actually, I think, some pretty decent reasons for why people need a license. And if there were more of you, I would have you tell me your answers. If anyone's brain in the room. But I think, what do you think?
What do I think?
Yeah.
Well, I just think there's a whole lot that comes with the educational part and experience that you get in the licensure program.
Okay, so training. It's a signal of training. Okay? Yeah, other ideas?
You mentioned tracking over time.
Tracking over time, yes. And that's a hot topic for some of the state board members right now. Here are some of the ideas or some of the reasons. Yes, the law says so. Okay. It guarantees funding for your school to help pay for them. That's part of the law. You have better teacher retention, better student proficiency, and you can track educator ethics when it's tied to a license, which is one of the things that's kind of the question about those SLPs.
So we have a question
Yes.
online. The question is, how would it work to have a licensed educator in one area who might teach a course in a CTE area as well?
Oh, good question. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to put a pin in that question, but we're going to come back to it because I've got a slide that talks about that exact thing. Okay. Okay. So here are the qualifying license areas, and these are the teachers. I put the teachers up here. There's one change that is big, and it's hidden. This won't, oops, it won't do it for me. Right here it says special education mathematics no longer requires the mathematics endorsement. So, if you have somebody in a secondary school teaching grade 7 special ed in a resource self-contained classroom, it used to be that they had to have a special ed license and a math endorsement. But the board removed the math endorsement this spring. And so as long as they have a special ed license, they can teach any SPED class. So that's one change. Yes?
If you have some of your regular teachers like teaching some of that math support, is there a special ed endorsement or thing? Because a lot of times they're taught by paras, right? And instead,
so
we want to switch that.
Okay, so the question is, I've got some general ed teachers, but they're supporting students with disabilities.
With math support, yeah.
With math support. There's not anything that is that specific. And the direction of the board at this time is not to create anything new. They don't want to add any more requirements. And so if that's professional learning that you feel your employees need, you can provide that. You can also request us to come and provide that training to your staff through our special ed department. They would be delighted to provide them with some professional learning, specifically in mathematics. They've got a math special ed specialist. Yeah. But that's a change. And then this is, again, the CTE can teach without a license. Okay. So here's the Apex Center CTE, and we've talked about a lot of it. Here's all the code if you care to get into it. But the key is that you hire them under the non-licensed part of the code, which means you still give them a background check. You hire them like any other normal employee or contractor. and you don't put them into Cactus because they're functioning as a sub as a non-licensed person, and we only put licensed people in Cactus. However, there are a couple of things around funding related to this bill. First is that if they're not licensed, they're not going to generate educator funding. But, as part of the bill states, they will qualify for full CTE funding. So if your school has a CTE program and gets CTE funding, and you hire a non-licensed person to come in and teach your robotics class because he really loves it, but he's a nerd that makes $1 billion on Silicon Slopes, awesome. You're still going to generate CTE funding, but you're not going to generate the educator salary adjustment for that person. Okay.
A question on funding.
Yeah.
Do you get funding for a site-specific license?
Ooh, the answer is yes, and we'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
Okay. One other thing that I wanted to mention that was part of related to CTE oftentimes is we've got some SRO, school resource officers or law enforcement that come and teach your law enforcement or public service classes. They're not required to have a background check because they're a police officer. They have to have a higher standard anyway. So there's that. Okay, special ed. I want to make sure that we understand this around special ed. If you have a special ed teacher who's working on a non-professional license, so they've got an associate license, they're working towards their professional license, you have 3 years to employ them on a non-professional license. And that is in the history of that person. So if they were on ARL in the 2010s and but didn't finish their program and now came back, you have a total of 3 years. If you've done 3 years and then they're not quite done, but you still need to employ them or want to employ them, you can do that, but you have to do it as a long-term sub, and there's limitations federally around what services an unlicensed person can provide. So an unlicensed person can't supervise an IEP, for example. So you would have to make sure you have somebody who's licensed that could supervise your cases. But this is the federal IDEA special ed. Okay. Okay, so here's SLPs and audiology. This is what the bill was, HB 374, Representative Ballard, and it was a recommendation out of the OPLR group, which is the Office of Professional License Review. And they moved for SLPs and audiologists licenses from USBE to DOPL. So USBE is no longer allowed to license anybody as an SLP or as an audiologist. Okay? It was effective in May. It means that if you have somebody who's working and has an active educator license in SLP, then their license is good until it expires. So it could potentially go until June of 2031. But once it expires, they have to go to DOPL and get a DOPL license. They have worked on a rule at DOPL to make it easy for people who have a USBE license to go over there. My understanding is that if the license is expired, it's more difficult. But our requirements at USBE are identical to the requirements at DOPL to get a license, so it shouldn't be a big lift there. Even if, so ESL, or SLPs and audiologists who have a DOPL license still qualify for special ed funding and the educator salary adjustment. So as part of that bill, they made sure that the funding that came to you for having a licensed SLP in your school, that still went to your school. So as long as they've got a license, DOPL or USBE in SLP, then they're going to qualify for all the educator funding and the special education stipends, those extra days for paperwork. Okay. We've talked about this a little bit. The board has set their strategic plan, USBE, and one of their 4 main goals is to streamline licensing and make it simpler and eliminate stuff that doesn't make sense so that it's not a ginormous maze. And so that's one of the reasons we're looking at how can we make this endorsement system simpler. We've actually already talked about this. But every course has an endorsement that's attached to it. And there's a lot of different combinations, 5,800 actually, of courses with license areas and endorsements, which can be cumbersome, no lie. But USIMS will help us understand those a lot easier, so when you put the assignment in, you will see immediately before you pick it whether or not they're qualified. It's like green or red. It's super easy. But until then, we're still in Cactus Land. But our Cactus website has all of those combinations for you. Okay, here's the question. I got a licensed teacher, but I need him to teach a CTE class. Great. There's 2 options there. You can employ them as a non-licensed or as a licensed teacher and request an LEA-specific endorsement, or this is new flexibility from the board. Anyone who has a professional teaching license for secondary and your LEA says they're qualified to do it, can teach up to 25% of their assignment outside their content area. So for example, I am a licensed math teacher. I have professional math endorsement. If I was hired, the LEA could hire me and 75% of my assignment could be math. And then they say, oh, but we need you to teach a physics class. And so that's 10%. And I'd say, okay, no problem. And then, oh, well, I need you also to do this PE class. Okay, no problem. As long as that PE class and the physics class aren't more than 25%, then you're not compliant. Then you're like fine. Everything's cool. The person will still show up as not qualified in Cactus. When we go to USIMS, it'll be a little bit different, we're hoping. But I'm not going to send you a letter. So in this email, or not email, in this question from the chat. So if you got somebody who's professionally licensed in science, 80% of their assignment is in science, and then they're going to teach a robotics class, which is CTE. As long as it's under 25%, no problem. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to request an LEA-specific endorsement. You don't have to do anything.
And funding won't be?
Funding does not, nope, because funding relies on the license only.
Okay.
Yep. The goal is to help reduce some of that burden of, hey board, I need these 10 people to have these 8 endorsements because we're a small charter school and everybody has to teach 1 million classes, not just one thing.
Well, Leah, that's in effect right now.
Yes, that's it. That's green. Green for go.
All right.
Okay. This is one of the additional things that has just been added, just went into effect in July. If you have somebody who wants to teach CTE, and they have 3 years of related experience working in the profession. So maybe they owned their own business for 3 years, then they can come and teach business courses and get the work experience endorsement and teach business. If they worked as a welder for 3 years, they can come and get the welding work experience endorsement. So they can still do the competency-based endorsement that fill out all the things. That's still available. Or within the career cluster, if they have worked in the field for 3 years, then they can teach the class. No problem.
How do they prove
well
competence?
Well, here's the thing. the board rule doesn't say competency, it says work experience.
Okay.
So how do you validate work experience? We have a form that the HR director of wherever it was that they were working sends to us, and we count up, do they have 3 years? And if they're self-employed, then they can provide us with tax records that say, here, see, I was operating this business and this is what I did. And that's it.
That's easy.
Yeah, super easy. And this is already up on our website, the whole process under our endorsement website. Okay, educator funding. Perfect. There's 2 parts of funding that are attached to educator licensing. Educator salary adjustment in October, and then teacher supplies and materials in June. And those are the board rules that are attached. There's actually code that is attached to both of them. The educator salary adjustment for this year is $10,660.50. Right? I know. Can you remember when it was like $3,800? I think it was like not that many years ago. So this is something the legislature has really poured a ton of money and resources into helping you pay your teachers better. So this year it was an increase of 3%, and that's the consumer price index increase. And these are the funds that would go to you and then to the teacher. Part of educator salary adjustment is also the the employer taxes, so like FICA, etc. And I think it's around $2,400 that we add to this $10,000 to cover those employer costs. So if you have one FTE, one teacher, you're actually getting into your bank account about $13,000. So $10,600 goes to the teacher, and the rest of it goes to help pay for their employment expenses. Workers' comp, etc., all that stuff. SHINE is a new program that took the place of TSSP, Teacher Salary Supplement Program. And this is your highly needed educators. And this is 100% decided by you. The LEA chooses, which teachers do I need? How much am I going to say, well, I really need this kind of a teacher? And so you get to set the qualifications, you get to set the amount, and that's it. You get to choose. Yes.
So just to confirm, there's no Cactus input or reporting to the state this year?
That is accurate because we have fulfilled our reporting duty to the legislature. So that was, we had 1 year of reporting.
Oh, we don't have to put SHINE on?
No, SHINE does not have to be added to Cactus this year.
Ah.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought I needed to do.
We're delighted to give you less work. The amount that your school gets is based on the prior year's October 1 student count. So basically there's this giant pot of money. They say, here's the pot of money, here's how many students we had, divided by that many students, and you get that much per kid. It helps smaller schools actually better than some of our larger districts. And you can be as creative as you want here. I've seen some really creative policies in this space. And some crazy amounts of bonuses also. Okay, educator salary adjustment. So in educators, that $10,000, there's 2 things that a person needs to generate this funding. First is they have to have a license that is either an educator license or one of the DOPL licenses that qualify on October 13th. On that date, they must also have a position or an assignment in Cactus that qualifies. That's it, those 2 things. If it's professional license, that qualifies. If it's associate, that qualifies. If it's LEA specific, site specific, qualifies. Every license that is an educator license qualifies. And then there are a few for DOPL. We'll talk about which ones specifically. But that's it, those 2 things. Here are all of the positions that generate educator salary adjustment. Something that is often confused is SLTs, speech language technicians. Those are your SLP helpers. They are included in this group, and they generate the same educator salary adjustment that a 3rd grade teacher would. If you want to look at all of our assignments, of which there are about 2,000, you can look and see exactly how much educator salary adjustment is generated for that assignment. There are a couple of things to pay attention to. Oh, let me make sure. Okay, good. First is if they have a DOPL license, then it's a social worker, which is LCSW or CSW, because that has to be master's level or higher. Audiologist or speech language pathologist. The temporary license will qualify for funding. So DOPL has a 1-year temporary license and then their regular license. Both generate the same amount of funding. There are 2 groups of people who do not generate educator salary adjustment. The first is anyone who is a school level administrator, principal, charter director, etc. They generate $2,500 instead. That's in board rule. The other group of people is anyone assigned to the LEA level. So if you have a superintendent assigned to the LEA level, they will not generate anything. If you have an instructional coach assigned to the LEA, they will not generate $10,000. But if you make sure they're assigned to a school, then they will generate the money. So when you're entering your assignments, make sure that you have selected, in Charterland it gets especially hard, because your LEA name is the same as your school name. And so you want to make sure that you choose a school where they're working as their location for their assignment. Otherwise, you're going to get a big fat egg instead. Okay? And if you have questions, please call us. We are happy to help. Happy to help. In USIMS, we're making it even more clear that you're assigning it to the LEA versus a school. But for right now, you just have to pay attention to the parentheses at the end. It'll say parentheses LEA. And that's the one you want to not pick, unless they're actually like at the LEA level. Okay, here are the deadlines to pay attention to for educator salary adjustment. October 1 is the deadline of when you want to make sure your LEA specific requests are reported, and that all of your people are all ducks are in a row, so that we can go in and award the LEA specific license. That's a manual process, and so we just want to make sure that's done. October 13th is when we do our report out of Cactus. That's the deadline to make sure all your assignments are in and the licenses are awarded. Then on the 14th we make a report, and the 15th we send it up to the legislature, to the office of the legislative fiscal analyst, and then they figure out how much we're going to send to you guys. Teacher supplies and materials are the other educator funding that happens. If you have a licensed teacher assigned to a classroom, that means it has to be a student code in Cactus, student. And if you look at the category, that will help you. So when you pick the assignment, you get the pop-up, the category that it falls under tells you whether or not it's a classroom assignment or a non-classroom assignment. So for example, teaching grade 3, is a classroom assignment. Being an instructional coach is not a classroom assignment. It's a student support assignment. It's only for elementary, secondary, and special ed, including preschool special ed. And it's $500 for elementary and $250 for secondary. I don't know who decided that us high school teachers don't buy stuff, but they're wrong. Because I buy things like graphing calculators and they are not cheap. But there is a difference there. So if you have an elementary teacher, they're going to generate more in their teacher supplies and materials.
Do SLPs qualify?
No.
No.
Because SLPs are not a classroom teacher. That's a student support assignment. Yes.
School level specialist.
No, because they're not assigned to a classroom. So if you've got a school level specialist, they'll generate educator salary adjustment as long as they're assigned to the school, but they won't generate teacher supplies because they're not a teacher in a classroom with kids. Because the intent is that this goes to buy your consumables, the extra pencils and crayons and whatever it is that you need to do in your classroom to make your classroom function. Maybe you buy more of those book bins at Walmart for $3.96 like I did. They're pretty sweet and they link together. Hot tip. Okay, on our website we have a lot of resources that are available to help you navigate Cactus if you would like to. If you're like, that seems hard, just call us and we will help you walk it through. We'll just help you. But this first one, number 2, is assignment requirements. So that's all of the assignments and the endorsements and license areas that qualify them to teach that class. The next one is the educator salary adjustment assignment. So that's how much educator salary adjustment that assignment will generate if assigned to a school. If they're assigned to teach 3rd grade, at the LEA level, they will generate nothing, including teacher supplies and materials, because they're at the LEA level, which is not in the classroom.
Okay, so can I ask a question?
Yes.
On Cactus, yeah, when you go to, I don't know why one of the teachers, it was done pre-Deborah.
Yes.
Is on the, I only have one that's in the LEA thing. Do I just move him and add him to the?
Yes, you just correct your data to make it accurate.
Oh my God, it's been this way.
I'm sure that it happens because everything rolls over if you don't go in and look at all of them. If you just say, oh, they've been here and my data's fine, you might be missing out on money.
I totally have. I've left him at the LEA thing. I don't know why they put him there. I didn't ask them.
Yeah. So make sure your people are assigned to the school level so they generate all the funding, unless they really are like an LEA level person.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
It says, does it matter the percentage of FTE the teacher is, or do they get the 500 for elementary or 250 for secondary?
It is dependent on FTE. So if you have an elementary teacher in a classroom, but they're only teaching half-day kindergarten, they're going to generate only half of the amount. So they'll get just $250 for popsicle sticks and glue.
Okay.
Okay, good question. Which is also the same for educator salary adjustment. If you've got a half-time person, they're going to generate half of that amount, whatever it is. If you have somebody who is half-time a teacher and then half-time an assistant principal at your school, they would generate half of the $10,600 and half of the $2,500. So like $7,000-ish. Okay. The last thing that's up here is it has the teacher supplies and materials, so it'll show you by assignment how much they're generating. So if you have a question, you're like, oh, I wonder if somebody who's assigned to grade 3, 4, 5, because there's an assignment called grades 3-4-5, how much does that person get? You can look at the assignment and it'll tell you that it generates $500. As long as they're assigned to a classroom. Okay, this is USIMS. We've already talked about this. So I'm gonna move on. Our last thing, oh, you guys, our timing is so choice. We're gonna talk about how does licensing actually impact your school? Utah is actually bucking the national trends right now in educator as far as our supply of teachers. We've got over 92% of all teachers have a professional license. We've got almost 92% teacher retention, which means that 92% of last year's teachers are going to show up this year to teach. And the 150 unfilled positions, those are typically the special ed that are not there, which is not very many. And we have almost 70% increase in teacher prep enrollment since 2020. There are many states, some of our neighbors, that this number is just going down. And some of our neighbors that are much smaller than us, like Idaho, have 1,400 unfilled positions last year. It's bonkers sauce. And the next state that I've seen is 86% of Colorado teachers have a professional license. So we're really doing quite well compared to a lot of our neighbors. And then when you get onto the other side of the Rockies, down east and south, it's really some tragic spaces there. But we're doing pretty great. Where are the teacher shortages? And this is district data, so this isn't charter specific data, because I couldn't figure out how to get it all in the time frame that I had. So you can see that the darker blue is where we have the more professionally licensed teachers. Our state average is kind of this color right here where this blue is. So you can see, you can tell almost immediately where our teacher prep programs are. Here at SUU and up there at Utah State. We make a lot of teachers. And so they have a lot of professionally licensed teachers in their market. But you get into some of our rural areas like Daggett, Uinta, Duchesne, Wayne, and Tintic, where those yellow, green areas, that's where we have a greater need for teachers. Because I don't know about you, but Tintic, unless you really love Tintic, that's a rough place to live, man. But if you grew up there and that's your people and you love that lifestyle, great. It's not for me. I love myself an amenity. So this is student proficiency based on license level. And this is based on RISE data from the 25 school year, 2024-25. And you can, science is purple, math is yellow, and language arts is this green color. And you can see that our professionally licensed teachers have student outcomes that are significantly higher than our teachers with associate and no license at all. And you'll notice that these are basically the same. Yes?
What's the sample size of it's not really a sample, right?
It's a sample size. I don't have the end size on this one, but I remember that this number was
92% of our teachers are in the professionally licensed category.
Correct. So this is
the
like
other 8% are spread between those two,
yes.
Right? Or I don't know, are there unlicensed teachers?
Like a couple.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who might be long-term subs or something.
Right.
Okay. So of the 8%,
yes.
How many of those are in the associate versus the LEA specific category?
We have slightly more associate license.
Just slightly.
Yeah, it's like a 60 to 40, but it's leaning more this way. We granted fewer LEA specific licenses this last year than ever before. Yeah. And I should put the end sizes up there, but it's like 30,000, and then it's like 2,000, and then 1,400 or something like that.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fascinating data.
I know, right? It's really interesting. I'm a data nerd. So, I was a math teacher, can you tell? So, this is the first year teacher retention. I put an end size on this one, you're welcome. This is the percent of our first year teachers that started last year and came back this year based on their license level. So all educators in their first year, 84.6% of them came back next year. If they had a professional license, 86.8% came back. So more than the state average. If they had an associate license, it was 85.5, still a little bit higher than the average. And if it was an LEA specific or no license at all, it was 76.6%. Interestingly, most of these people quit before the end of the school year. It's really... So what does that mean for hiring practices? If I were hiring and I had the option between somebody who had never taught and had an LEA specific or was going to be on an LEA specific license, or somebody who maybe was brand new but had a professional license, if I didn't want to have to rehire that position next year, then maybe I might lean towards the professionally licensed person because there's a greater chance they're coming back. Obviously, there's a lot of other things under this data, right? But this is one indicator. I think this, more so than a license, indicates preparation for the job that is hard.
That's so good.
If you are LEA specific, you're like, I like kids, I'm in. But you may have no idea. Did you have a question? Comment?
I'm asking a question you probably don't have the answer to, but just out of curiosity, and if you're curious, we can talk about it. But I wonder how many of those LEA-specific licenses that stick around, right? Okay, yeah. I made it through a hard year of this job. It's much easier the second year.
Yes.
Right? How many of those people go on to climb that ladder?
Almost all of them. Virtually all of them.
Virtually all of them will move up and get that professional license.
Yeah, eventually. Yeah. There's a handful, like when I say handful, like statewide, maybe, 30 that just have no interest and their employer is like, you're cool. Like I know in Paiute, they're looking at someone to teach music who's an amazing musician, all this training, but attended an unaccredited religious college, so doesn't have a degree from an accredited institution, has zero interest in getting another bachelor's degree. And so they're going to say, hey, guess what? You are awesome. You're so good for our little tiny district of 160 students, and we're going to put you on an LEA specific until you will die in the role, please, never retire. Right? So, but it's really tiny numbers statewide.
Okay.
This is all teacher retention, so this is like everyone who came back. And this is, I didn't break down the end size by section, I should have, but it's roughly the same, 30,000, 2,000, 1,400-ish. And so if you've got a professional license, you're more likely to come back. And then as the licensure goes down, so does retention. Oh, that's it. We did it all. Okay, the last thing I want to make sure you have is how to contact us and get support, because we will help you. We know it's complex. We know it's something that you do once a year, maybe, and then you have to put on 30 other hats. So we'll help you put this hat on and get whatever you need to get done. You can reach me. There's my contact information. You can book a Teams meeting with me. We've got our newsletters, which are awesome. If you don't get those, make sure you sign up. And then there's a link to our office hours are there. That's it. I'm done.
Thank you.
I went over, but I'm going to blame Lincoln for his data questions.
Right. Blame Lincoln. Okay. Thank you for your expertise, your knowledge. I will send out your slides with my follow-up email. I did want to just say thank you for attending. I will send out the schedule for the full series of these meetings, but I can tell you right now that our next meeting will be on September 17th
And that meeting will be from 1 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, again, because there's a school safety train the trainer in the morning, and I didn't want to conflict with that. Actually, I'm the presenter. So if you guys want to see me teaching the train the trainer, come to that meeting in the morning, and it's at the Canyons Learning Center, which is close by here. I don't know the exact address.
It's just right that way. It's
over
walkable. It's literally walkable. It's right there.
So we can all meet over there, and then we can walk over here and come have our next directors meeting. And then the following meeting after that will be in October, and that one will be only virtual on October 22nd because of another conflict. But we will have that meeting in the morning, and then the other meeting that is the conflicts in the afternoon. So thank you everybody for coming, and all of our people online. We had about 41 people online, which is awesome.
Especially the first week of school.
Yes.
You guys are all troopers.
I also want to share out that we do have lunch scheduled. We have a lunch sponsor for November. So come celebrate, like getting over the hump of the first little bit of school, and we will have lunch together in November. So that is all I have for you guys. Thank you so much. Thanks for everybody online.
So the CCR, we added the CCR as a requirement, like to do the thing.